Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Lakewood City Council study session in the city of Lakewood, Colorado on August 6, 2018 at 7 p.m. in council chambers. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Paul?
Here.
Johnson?
Present.
Vincent? Present. Vita?
Here.
Franks?
Here.
Roybal?
Here.
Gutwein?
Here.
Skilling?
Here.
Garrison?
Here.
Abel?
Here.
LeBure?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you to those folks who came out tonight, and for those who may be tuning in at home or kind of weighing in later on online or on Channel 8. This is a unique opportunity. This is a study session, but really tonight is dedicated to public comment and public input. There's a lot of issues in the community that are of great interest, so this is the opportunity. I'm going to ask, we have item 3, which is just general input, so that's going to be anything non-Tabor related. And so if you're here to speak about anything non-Tabor related, I'd ask that you please sign up right now if you haven't, if you'd like to speak. And then we'll have a short presentation by our finance director, Larry Dorr, and then we'll have a public comment period directed to the Tabor discussion in and of itself. So we'll wait a couple seconds. If you haven't signed up for general input, please do so now. And while we're waiting, I will just mention the ground rules I think most of you are familiar with, but we certainly ask that all in attendance observe the decorum in the city council chambers and refrain from applause or audible support or discord with the speaker. All comments should be directed to the city council. There's a 3-minute limit per speaker. The indicator lights on the lectern will be yellow at 2.5 minutes and red when your 3 minutes is up, and I will gently try to move you on after that 3 minutes so we can keep moving and get other people up here to speak. And if for some reason you signed up on the wrong sheet, just let me know and we'll move you over. All right. So first up I have Christine Jackson. Oh, okay. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming. Benjamin, are you just hanging out tonight too? All right. Welcome. James Bunch, is that accurate? Come on down, sir. Welcome.
Where do you want me?
Right here. Okay. Yes, sir.
All right, Mayor and members of the council and members of the staff. I attended a ward meeting the other day and they were talking about the trash hauling. And what I kind of told them there, you know, if you were going to do a case study on government overreach, this would be a classic case. This is, you clearly have a perfect market there. You have competitors that you can pick and choose from. It determines the best price. And I don't, you know, what I'm saying is that I can't even imagine what kind of an ordinance you could pass to tell people dealing with a private contractor that you couldn't use them anymore. To me, this is really a step too far. It seems to me there's better ways to handle this. I heard about violations, driving up and down the street wrong. Clearly, the city has all the armaments they need to deal with somebody driving down the street the wrong way. You give them a ticket. If they're making too much noise, you probably have a noise ordinance. But to change this whole thing and go down a road that, to my opinion, is really where the city shouldn't be. If you should not be interfering with your constituents and their private contractors. And I was really kind of taken back when they said that this might have been an objective, and I thought, wow, that's whistling Dixie. But it does seem to me that constituents, really, the rank and file, they want the normal city services that you provide and provide quite well. I'll tell you that right now. but what you provide, but I don't think they really want some kind of a body like this kind of organizing their lives. I mean, I think we're all capable of taking care of ourselves. We can make those decisions when it comes to matters like this. And I just think that's a road too far, and I think we probably should do better. And this to me is really kind of a pie in the sky, and I'm not so sure it would really work. You might even have issues even dealing with it. But anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to talk, and wish you well.
Great, thank you. Thanks for coming out. Marianne Nagel. Come on down. Good evening, welcome.
I have a petition, a copy of it I'd like.
Pull down, yeah. You can pull it down. Yep, there you go.
I have a petition I'd like to give you.
Just go ahead and leave it with the clerk, that'd be great.
Okay.
And does your whole team want to come down? Are you all speaking individually? Okay, if you just want to be ready and come on down, that's fine.
Okay. I'm a very poor extemporaneous speaker, so I've prepared my remarks and I'll read them. My fellow neighbors and I who are here tonight live in the area immediately north of the Westland Shopping Center area, and we have a petition asking the city to put park and open space in the area around the Westland Shopping Center area. This area is a park desert in Lakeland. Sue and Harlan will be speaking after I speak. I'll be speaking about what the residents said to me when I went and knocked on 760 doors. Sue will speak about the value of a park in a neighborhood. And Harlan will speak about the parcels in the area that could become parks. First, a few words about why we started this endeavor to get the city to provide more park and open space in this area. After the Westlink apartment complex was built, which is where the old Target was on Colfax, we learned about plans for the Avenida and Oak Street apartments. They're currently under construction. All three of these apartment complexes together are going to result in 771 new apartments. This area has been a retail wasteland even before the rise of internet stores. We were a little concerned that the Sears is eventually going to go bankrupt. The Lowe's there is not as busy as other Lowe's. It might also become vacant. The Gordman's has gone vacant. So we were concerned that we have all these new residents. There's no parks to balance out where these people go for green space. There might be even more apartments built there. And also, we learned that the city owns almost 20 acres, the Westland parking lot. So what would happen to the Westland parking lot area? Okay, we started this petition in May of this year, and I knocked on 760 doors. I went to Westlink Apartments, I went to St. Moritz Apartments, I went to Quail Ridge Condominiums, and I went to single-family homes on Nelson Moore, 17th and 18th, right behind Nelson. 72% of the people who answered the doors were in favor of more park and open space. Since it seems like to be in favor of park and open space is kind of like being in favor of motherhood and apple pie, I was really interested in the reasons of people who would not sign the petition. Most people, just said they were not interested, go away, why'd you knock on my door? But some people told me why they were opposed. Several people said they just didn't sign petitions. They thought more park and open space was a great idea, but they just did not sign petitions. Several women said their husband wasn't home and they would have to talk to him before they signed anything. A lot of people did not have a good command of English and they did not understand what I was asking. A few people told me they were just visiting and didn't actually live at the apartment. They were just visiting, maybe short-term rentals, I don't know. Several people told me they were moving real soon, so they wouldn't sign the petition. A few people said that there was already adequate park space. One woman told me that I think it was 3 people, of the people I talked to. One woman told me she went to Daniels Park. She was in favor of more single-family residential because she wanted to buy a home, couldn't afford it, increased supply, would drive the prices down. One person told me she had friends who owned the Pet Boy on Colfax, and she was concerned that if she signed this petition, Pet Boy would be displaced. One person said the apartment complexes should be providing the green space, that the city shouldn't have to do that. One person said parks would attract the homeless. One person told me that parks drove too fast on Miller Street, and she'd been trying to get the city of Lakewood to put up one of those electronic speeding signs. The city hadn't done it, so she wouldn't sign this petition. The manager of the manager of Westlink Apartments told me the old YMCA property was a park, a city park. So a lot of residents at Westlink thought it was a city park. Several of them complained to me about what a lousy job the city was doing keeping up that park. Most people thank me for the efforts. People who thank me.
So your 3 minutes is up.
Okay.
We can move on to the next if you'd like.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome.
My name is Susan Ruffert, R-U-F-F-E-R-T. I live at 1795 Moore Street. I'm a long-term resident of Lakewood. I've been in the house that I'm in now for 40 years, and before then, for 5 years, 1 block over. So I've seen a lot of changes in the neighborhood. Progression, which is great, but when my children were young, we had the YMCA on 20th and Quail. And there was green space there, there was family activities there, things that would bring a family together. We don't have that anymore. We have all these new builds, but no new park spaces. Nothing to bring the families together in our area. And I think we have a special area. We really do. We've got the Lakewood Library, we're close to light rail, we're close to Federal Center, we're right off of West Colfax, gateway to the foothills. It's just a really special area, and we want to bring families in. And the way to do that is to have a neighborhood that's family friendly. And to bring more parks, that's what we need, parks and green space, so we can have recreation, especially for all these new people, new builds coming in. They need some recreational spaces. So I really ask you to look at the petition that Marianne put together. It's very well done, and really consider the options that we have, because now's the time to use those options before there's more new builds planned. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Harlan, you're playing cleanup. Welcome.
Good evening. My name's Harlan Feder, F-E-D-E-R, 10495 West 18th Avenue, Lakewood, Ward 1. First off, as a resident who enjoys parks, trails, and open space, I want to thank the city and the Taylor family for the acquisition of 60 acres of open space near Morrison Road in Wadsworth. That's a great addition to our community, and I can't wait to explore it. Closer to home, our neighborhood near Westland Shopping Center is experiencing the addition of new high-density apartment complexes, as you heard, a total of 771 new apartments that will bring in well over 1,000 new residents. We really need to add some new open space or parks to the mix. The city has stated in many forums that open space and parks are a priority for Lakewood residents, and that the city has been able to preserve a quarter of Lakewood in parks, open space, and trails. We're not seeing that ratio in our neighborhood, and I'd respectfully like to request that you make that a priority for our area now, and as other developments are considered in the near future in our neighborhood. As Marianne mentioned in her presentation, many of the 200-plus neighbors that we surveyed are very enthusiastic for more open space and parks within walking distance. People have asked where a park in our area might go. I'd like to briefly and generally list 6 areas that might work for a park or open space without naming any present owners except the city. You all have more detailed information on these parcels and petition results, both in an email from Mary Ann and in hard copies this evening. So just very quickly, 1590 Quail Street, about 2+ acres, a parcel located between West Link and King Supers. South and west of Phil Knorr on Colfax and Quail, 3 parcels totaling about 17 acres. North and east of Colfax and Quail, 5 parcels, 5+ acres. South and east of 20th and Quail, 3 parcels at about 8+ acres, the old YMCA site that Mary Ann and Sue mentioned. Parking lot at Westland Shopping Center, 20 acres, owned by the city of Lakewood. If at some point Westland owners decide that brick and mortar retail is no longer viable there and present or future owners of Westland wish to build more high-density apartments, the city could possibly exercise rights to secure some or all of this parcel for a park. And north and east of Oak and 17th, 1.2 acres. Please take action to add open space or parks to this area of Lakewood. We stand ready and willing to help the city in this effort, along with many of the people we surveyed, on behalf of present and future neighbors and residents. And we'd be grateful if you could recommend a city staff person for contact and follow-up on this matter at some point in the near future. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. We'll come back to that. For those folks that may have come in late, this is just the general public input section. So if you want to speak on anything non-Tabor related, please sign in at the back, and we'll make sure we get you on this docket. I have Paul Mountain. And I have Jenna Mountain. Did you sign them in? Did your group sign them in?
Yes, but we didn't realize that they were not able to make it.
Oh, okay. Lynn? And Kenny? Kenny, please. And then Lynn English, and then Cece. And I'm assuming we have your addresses on file?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Speed dial, right?
Welcome.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you. So, although we've made a lot of progress with the House of Rats, there's still a lot of progress that needs to happen. And I think we're all aware of that. We had the Ward 5 meeting on Saturday. One of the things that came out in that meeting was that the owner may be moving back in. And we're all very, very concerned about that. And we think that there needs to be some actual rules set before she does that, even though it's her property. Because if she's done it once, she's probably going to do it again. And so we need to speak to that, what's going to happen with the code, and it's going to be enforced. And I guess one of the ways around that could be that we actually have codes that could be enforced. Because I know that's been kind of a touchy subject, that the rats haven't been addressed in the code, so we need to make that very, very clear. One of the other questions that keeps popping up is what is going to happen to the house? And I'm going to be very honest. People want the house torn down. They want it raised, and they don't want anything built on that site. So that's what I'm hearing. And when you go to ward meetings, there's those that go and those that don't go. And those that don't go aren't going to make their opinions known, but only to people like me that ask them. So this is what I'm hearing. And the second, so we know that they want it torn down. And then I have a question for the city attorney, and it's, does city law and codes prevail over Colorado, or is it whatever most strict? And the reason I ask that is because I pulled up a case that was in the Colorado Supreme Court today, and it talks specifically about blight. And there's 4 conditions out of, like, I think there was 10, and only 4 conditions need to be met in order to consider it blight. And that structure meets at least 4 of them, if not 80% of them. And then the last thing that I had sent the city attorney, Tim Cox, an email back on July 19th, asking what was going to happen, and then I felt, that that he needed to exercise eminent domain or condemn the property. And I knew that we would have to pay fair market value for it. And so my only statement right now, and this is how I'm going to end it, is that that homeowner has single-handedly diminished every property value in our neighborhood. And so now would be the time to do that and offer her the fair market value, which might be the land value, and it may not even be that much. So, thank you.
Thank you. Lynn English?
Good evening. Thank you. I think the Ward 5 meeting was the best meeting I've been to so far. It was the most positive. We heard a lot of good things that are happening. Please don't make us push mud uphill to go further with this, because that's what it's taken to get any results at this point. And as I said, I don't have much to say, but on the asbestos, I know we will find out that the results of that test on the 13th, and I asked that Caitlin be asked to let us know that as soon as she knows the information. Because that, as far as I'm concerned, may make the difference in whether or not she stays or the house is torn down. And if the owners are to move back in, would you also, as soon as you know something about this, let Elcar know, let all of us know, because at that point, we've got to have code enforcements already in place. Because again, as Lynn said, probably if she's done something like this once, she'll do it again. She has another property that looks just like this. So, thank you.
Thank you. Cece? And then Diane, you're on deck. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm here again to talk about the rats. I would like the code to be revised soon. Soon. The reason being, this woman will be back in that house before we have a new code. And the code we have cannot be enforced. The gentleman who can enforce the code is the city attorney. I want to see a draft soon. Okay? That's the one thing. The next thing is, I don't know about the flies. We forgot to ask about the flies on Saturday. But Chief Lohr mentioned that the flies, too, are now a problem, in addition to the rats. And I am so sick of talking about this, I cannot tell you. I think there's going to be a public mutiny if this woman returns to this home. I really do. I think that is not going to be okay. Finally, you as a city, meaning through the council and also through Chief Lohr's statements, have guaranteed an amount of $150,000 to clean this house up if that lady can't. And I am betting that she can't. I have asked for records on this. There are none, apparently. None. No communications about this. I find that hard to believe. If the city is going to step in and take charge of that debt, then by God, there ought to be some documents about it. It's been publicly announced. And I think that's a necessary thing. Lastly, I thought the Ward 5 meeting was very helpful. It was helpful to get the information out there. One thing, Karen, Norway rats are not indigenous to Lakewood, Colorado. Not. That is a fact. I am daring to bring it up because last time somebody brought up something that was contradictory, your husband screamed. As a female, I find that very offensive. And I think most of the people in that room were very uncomfortable, and I don't think that needs to happen again, and I hate to bring it up. I really do. But that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, is there another sheet that we need to grab? Okay. All right, so that will close the public comment on general public input. Mr. Bunch, currently we're just gathering information on trash and recycling and a whole bunch of different things. So thank you for being a part of the conversation. And as we've learned in the past, trash is a passionate subject for many, and so we take it quite seriously. So thank you. And our crew left from the North Lakewood Ward 1 area, but well done on their survey, and we all have that. And I think we'll turn that over to the city manager, and her team can carry it from there. But great responses, hitting 700 and some doors. And for the LCAR folks, we'll just continue to ask you to work with Caitlin and get you that information as we have it. Okay. So we'll move into item 4. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Dorr. And again, if you want to speak on the public input portion on this, please sign up, and we'll get to that after this presentation.
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council. Once again, Larry Dorr, City of Lakewood Finance Director and City Treasurer. As I'm waiting for the Madam Clerk to queue up our PowerPoint, I'll just jump right in. This is yet another step along quite a journey that you as council have been on since February. It's hard to believe that nearly 6 months have gone by that this conversation has been happening. And just to kind of recap what's happened since February, council had its 2018 planning session and set forth a number of goals for 2018, and the city manager and all of the city staff have been focused on those goals since that time. One of those goals was to identify strategies to pay for community needs. And as a follow-up to that, I provided some information at Council's orientation on March 5th. I gave a little bit of an overview of Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. And then there were 2 study sessions. Of course, these are all public events, and that information is still there. I won't recap all of that, but just a little for those who might be tuning in really for the first time to this subject here tonight. As a result of this second council study session, there was an assignment set forth to council's Budget and Audit Committee, which is a committee of 3 citizens and 3 council members, to further study the matter and go into just a little bit more detail. And then as a result of that, there was a report back to council on June 4th. And on June 4th, council's direction was to have the city staff begin a city engagement process, which I'll overview a little bit later in this presentation. But it's also allowed really a 2-month period for each of you to have various community meetings, ward meetings, neighborhood association meetings, and so forth, to really reach out to the community and get feedback and input and so forth. So it's been a structured process, an unstructured process of really engaging the community in this subject over the last couple of months. So that's just sort of an overview of what's been discussed and sort of where we're going. But since our last meeting on June 4th, there's been some financial information available, and I want to just give a little overview of that. Our 3 council members of the Budget and Audit Committee have seen these, but I feel it's valuable for the community dialogue to occur, and then also for all of council to see. And really that's the results of the 2017 financial information. Our city auditors, which is an external CPA firm that reviews all of the financial books and records of the city, was on hand to give their report. That's the firm of Anton Collins Mitchell, which is a national certified public accountant firm, and that's all in order with of course the city charter. But here are the results really for 2017 in the general fund, and you see the revenues minus Tabor, net revenue, and then expenditures. And as you see, it's a operating subtotal of $211,000. I should have on this slide that you have to add 3 zeros to each of those. I'm a little bit used to working with the larger numbers, but that top line would be $125,483,000. So I beg your pardon, I should have that on the slide. But as you'll see, there's a very, very narrow operating margin as a city. And that's is getting more and more challenging, of course, as the cost of services is escalating a little bit faster than the cost of goods. So we're going to have some work to do there. And of course, Council's budget study session is already scheduled for September 17th. And of course, I'll go into much more detail of that. But as you know, in building a budget, you look backward, you look at what's going on so far this year, and then we'll do some forecasts for the future. In addition, Council's direction a couple of years ago was for the city overall. Of course, Council makes all the appropriations, all of the spending decisions, but for the city to begin using its reserves to undertake generational type capital projects. And that was done. So $6,115,000 was transferred from reserves for capital projects. And it was quite a long list, but I think one of the biggest ones, of course, was the Lasley Park reconstruction, and that's quite vivid now because Lasley is reopened. And then there was a whole slew of things like a park path pavement reconstruction, and the amphitheater here at Belmar Park, which is also completed, and we're all enjoying that now throughout this summer. So the bottom line, I like to just keep it simple as opposed to net income or that kind of thing. Bottom line was $5,904,000, and I provided that to the committee in July. And then also just an overlook of the reserves. I've seen some questions in the citizen survey, and as I've gone out and spoken at some of the ward meetings about city reserves and where are those, and I want to just provide this information. You can see where the city is at as of December 31st, 2017. Very transparent. You can go online and look at the city's annual financial report and see the number there, $30,200,000. And I suppose I should add that that's in millions up there. I'll get better at that, I promise. One of the things, however, to check in on is, of course, that's a large number. That's a very large number, but all things are relative, of course. And one of the things that is popular in my profession, which is city finance administration, is sort of comparing the reserves from one community to the next. Now, clearly, a very large community like Denver would probably have more on hand in reserves. I mean, the operating fund of City and County of Denver's general fund is nearly $1 billion. So clearly, they would have more cash on hand in reserves. And then a smaller community may be like Edgewater. Obviously, we'd have a much smaller reserve. But the way to do that is really to measure the amount of the reserve as the numerator and the amount of spending as the denominator, and get a percentage. So similar to a business, a very large business would have more cash on hand or more working capital than a very small business. And here's how that shakes out. So I've gone out and looked at the audited financial reports for a number of cities along the Front Range, and a few cities haven't yet put their audited financial statements on the internet just yet. So I'm waiting on Boulder, Centennial, and Wheat Ridge. This is through Friday. We'll continue to check on those, and I'll update you on that next month at Council's budget study session. But it gives you an idea of what other communities are at and where Lakewood is along the curve there. So clearly, some of the smaller communities might have a larger percentage just as it relates to overall spending. And then I also felt it might be relevant to have Jefferson County present on there. Now, their business is a little bit different, of course, and so they may or may not need a slightly different reserve. And Council has a policy on city reserves to be at least 10%, and that's greater than the Tabor required minimum of 3%. And I show that a little bit later in my presentation. One of the things that's relevant to this is many people have heard the old adage over the years about keep X months spending in the bank. And I say X because maybe some households said 6 months spending or a year or something like that, and why Lakewood would have 3 months. And of course, it's a bit of a rainy day fund. So is Colorado Mills closed, and that impacts sales tax revenues? Or in the past, we've had damage to facilities that may or may not be insured. We had a leak in the swimming pool, Carmody Rec Center, last decade, and that was an important asset to the community, and the city needed to get that fixed up so that that could continue to be enjoyed. So really quickly, now, Council, you know what is Tabor. I know that, but just for those in the audience, I want to do this really quickly. First of all, this was created by a statewide vote, and it's an amendment to the state constitution. It governs the state's finances, and many of the dimensions of Tabor are really relevant directly to the state itself. So, for example, the state's reserves at the time of the Tabor passage were actually less than 3%. And so Tabor required the state to get at least to 3%. But of course, Lakewood and many other cities were already well over that. But Tabor also governs counties, school boards, school districts, cities, towns, etc. So it's widely applicable. It requires that all tax increases be approved by a citizen vote. Now, that's been in the Lakewood City Charter and isn't really new or frankly interesting, because that's kind of an overlap. Tabor also requires that most bonds or loans be approved by a vote of the citizens. I mentioned the emergency reserve, which is 3% of spending. And of course, the state has gotten up to that level now. And then annual revenues are limited to inflation, and any excess has to be refunded. That's really kind of the meat of the subject of what we're here tonight. But then also, Tabor is very explicit. Voters may alter or eliminate as desired by the voters. They have the opportunity to do that. Tabor is very explicit. There's quite a detailed section on that very subject. And in fact, Tabor spells out when the vote can occur and minimum disclosures in the ballot question and so forth. Tabor has quite a bit to say about how the vote is undertaken and when it can occur as well. Has to occur during a general election, not during a special election, for example. So that's a little bit on Tabor. So how about Tabor and Lakewood? The city has had 4 previous Tabor elections. They've all been approved. And I've given a little bit of an overview to council on what that looks like. In the last 4 years, the city has refunded $16 million. You don't have to add any zeros to that. I think I got that one right, finally. No zeros, unless you want to put .00. But anyway, presently there is a pending refund that council would decide how and when that would be refunded. And as I mentioned, you saw it on an earlier slide, the amount of the refund is $12,536,504. No zeros to add to that. I mentioned the city council goal, strategies to pay for community needs. We did have, as a part of our earlier study session, a look at debt financing and tax increases and how all that works. I mentioned already the 4 public meetings, and then the citizen engagement process, which I'll talk a little bit about now. And I have to tell you, I'm not involved in this function of the city's business on a day-to-day basis as the city treasurer, the city's chief accountant, and the finance director. And I have to say, getting close to this and really seeing this in action is really impressive. It's really been a learning process for me, and I've really become a student of it. And I'll be able to answer any questions you might have about that as we go along. But what I've really been impressed with is all the different platforms and all the different ways that the city can reach out to the citizens. First, the city has a Friday report. Many people in the audience might not be familiar with that. Well, it's just as it says. It's a report that comes out on Friday. It includes a lot of different community activities and updates and bulletins and so forth. And you have to subscribe to that. You can look at it on the internet, but you can subscribe to it and receive information emailed each Friday. And there were 2 articles present in the Friday report related to this citizen engagement process and inviting the subscribers to come to the city's website, Lakewood Together, to learn, to share, and to participate in a survey. Also, the city has an old-fashioned, I'm just going to call it that now, Looking at Lakewood, which is a newsletter on paper that goes out in the mail and at different times during the year. And there was one article on this subject. Again, with all of these, the focus is to invite people to come and participate or get in touch with council members. Also, the city's outreach process or outreach platform called Lakewood Together has a newsletter, again with subscribers. There were 2 articles there. Also, the city participates in Nextdoor.com as an entity. The city is a subscriber. It's part of our public outreach, and there were 2 postings there. Also, the city participates on Twitter, and I don't think I've said 3 tweets ever before in a presentation, so I'm excited to say that. 3 tweets on the subject. And also, the city's public outreach is engaged in Facebook, of course, and we have data on the number of subscribers and who's involved in all that. And then, of course, we have Channel 8. We have Channel 8 for those who are either watching online or if they are Comcast subscribers, they actually go to Channel 8. And on our bulletin board, again, information inviting people to get involved and participate in person or online or in whatever platform is best for them. Okay, so the backbone of the engagement process is really inviting people to come to Lakewood together. This is a unique software and engagement tool that allows people to interact in different ways. Some folks like to click on videos and get a little information. Others like to download information and read them later on paper or on their iPads or what have you. And some people just kind of like to scroll. And so this platform really involves people with a variety of different preferences. Some people like to do it all, right? And so we can do that. And that's Lakewood Together. And here are some of the outcomes of that engagement process. And I should say that all of the information, and there are reams of data, were provided to council just last week. We wanted to give you the most up-to-date. And of course, this platform is live now, and people can go to it tonight, tomorrow. In fact, I imagine it might be available somewhat, not indefinitely, but at least for the next number of days and weeks until it's perhaps no longer relevant or interesting. But there were 1,600 website visits, over 700 surveys completed, and the surveys involved people's feelings about different city services and how they feel about Tabor and how they feel about the amenities in the community and what's important to them. 71% of the surveys said yes, Lakewood should keep and spend the refund. It also asked what's important to citizens, and it allowed people to click a drop-down menu and select from their choices of what's important. But also, they had an opportunity in what's called an open box. We've all seen that. There's a square. You click on it and you just type in what you want. And 210 people did that. And that's the reams of data. I've only had a chance to just sort of skim that, but some of the commentary is long and detailed, and people were able to really express their passion or dispassion for a number of things in there. And again, as I mentioned, all stats and narratives were provided to City Council for your review. So with that, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, thank you. I wanted to try to keep that as brief as possible, and of course I'll be available for questions, and also our citizen engagement folks can answer any details that I might not be able to cover.
Great.
Thank you.
So we'll go through council questions, and then we'll have public input. And I think clearly there won't be any sort of decision made tonight by council. We have this again calendared for August 13th to have further discussion, and that will be a regular meeting. So I just have one quick question related to your presentation. It was a slide that Budget and Audit Committee was able to see, and it wasn't part of this presentation, which is fine. But there was something that struck me in that meeting. That was the city's total debt as to the ratio of debt that the city holds and what percentage that is. And it was surprising how low it is. And if you could maybe speak to that.
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, Larry Dorr, City of Lakewood Finance Director. Let's see. Yes, we did talk a little bit about that. And debts can be expressed in more than one way. It's, first of all, the amount of loans or debt outstanding. We talked a little bit about that. All of the city's largest debts for capital projects will be paid off in 2022. That's very unusual. That's very unique across the Front Range. But we also expressed it as a percentage of income, and that's probably something that many people are familiar with, and that is if you're buying a home, typically a bank will loan a family, a household, about 30 to 40% of their monthly income as a mortgage payment. And that's pretty common. That's been well known for a long time. The city's debt payments as a percentage of the city's general income is about 3%. So it's a much smaller number. So yes, Mr. Mayor, that was discussed there, and I don't have a slide on that tonight.
And I think that outstanding debt is about 20-some million, 22 million.
It's in that range.
So that'll be the COPs, the certificates of participation, which will be paid off. Then we'd probably have maybe two outstanding, and that's one pension obligation, which is, I think, $3 million. It's a long-term pension obligation. And then we have a lease purchase agreement for solar panels, which I think we signed on to last year, which is about 10 years. So in all, that's really it as far as the city's debt.
Yes.
That's awesome. Mr. Abel.
Thank you. That 3%, that rates pretty well with the rest of cities in the metro area, does it not?
I think that would be on the lower end compared to.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Do you have any average figure for the metro area or a top figure?
I don't.
A couple of things about, that was a good presentation as usual. Thank you. I do have a couple of questions. You said Tabor is limited to inflation. Is there not a population growth portion of that calculation?
Thank you. It is inflation, which is the Denver, Boulder, Lakewood Consumer Price Index as produced by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I did leave off the local growth. Now at the state level, it's the inflation factor plus population. But at the city, county, school district level, it is inflation plus local growth. And the local growth is really the increase in sort of new construction in the community. In the last 10 years for Lakewood, that's been less than 0.75%. So it's a pretty small factor, but I should have included that in the presentation.
And this year it's likely to be larger, but not a lot larger.
I wouldn't anticipate it.
Also, the survey at our Ward 1 meeting, some folks were saying they took the survey 3 or 4 times. Is that possible? They said they had 3 or 4 devices around the house and in fact could even take it sometimes twice with the same device.
Thank you. We took a look at that because we felt that that would be important, and I learned a lot about that process and how the city can assess the possibility of doing that. And clearly what we're most concerned about are those sort of computers, frankly, that can just do survey after survey after survey. We didn't see any instances of that. Certainly, and we did track through Internet Protocol or IP address the number of responses from a given location. We have the ability to do that. We did have instances, in fact we had 3 instances where 3 surveys were filled out from the same household. Now, in that instance, you could have an adult child or a grandparent or perhaps 2 spouses. We did have 1 address that filled out 4 surveys. So again, it could be a large household. And those weren't really outliers. We want to make sure that that's a valid information. But at the same time, this is not a professional statistical study with questions that line up that make it a statistically valid situation, but rather this is a survey, and but we wanted to make sure that the responses online weren't in the tens of thousands from one location, overseas.
And were there any from overseas?
I'm not aware that there were any from overseas. In fact, the part of the response included a question asking people to include their zip code, and so that was another way for really the control. And no, most concerning would be 5,000 responses from one foreign country, and that didn't occur.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ms. Franks.
Thanks, Mayor Paul. I did want to comment. I'm glad you guys said it wasn't statistically, scientific, because we are not going to go into the dynamic versus static IPs and how I could roll my IP as many times as I wanted and look like I was multiple people. So from a technology standpoint, but I do think that we ran our own survey, Councilor Skilling and myself, and required people to put in names and addresses that then could be verified. And I would say that our responses would kind of line up very similarly. So I did want to just kind of add that there's a lot of technology out there, and that's anyways, I did want to have a question answered because in our survey, which ours, we only had 2 questions. And again, for those who, it again is not scientific in any way, shape, or form. It was really meant to get the pulse of people. We also had a comment box. And some people put a sentence and some people gave us a novel. And we appreciate every bit of that information. But one of the ones that was reoccurring was the question of, where else might you want that money to go if it didn't, where else might you want it to go? And several of the people answered and said, I want it to go to the school district to fund those activities. And I wanted you, Mr. Dorr, to speak to that, to kind of explain that situation and why that would not be feasible.
Thank you. The city's charter and focus describes our mission, really, which is to provide municipal services, and we're all familiar with what those are. We're not providing education. We're not regulated by the State Department of Education, and so that's, may I just say, tricky. And I suppose legal arguments could be made on one side and legal arguments could be made on the other side, but it's probably not prudent for the city to get, in the middle of those 2 legal arguments as it was. So indeed, the city does partner with the school district for outdoor athletics and other programs, and clearly, the city is involved as a matter of public safety and also early childhood education and different things that come close to education. But absent a vote of the people asking for their tax refund to go be a cashier's check to the school district, I just don't think that that's feasible or prudent within the scope of what the city's to provide to the public.
Thank you. I really respected those folks, appreciating that we have a lot of funding needs in the school, but I certainly wanted to make sure that that answer kind of got out there so they could kind of see it in a broader context. The other couple questions that I got privately were, can those funds, if they are, and again, it would all be a part of the ballot question, what these things, what they could and couldn't be, and whether it was sunsetted and all that if it's put on the ballot. But folks were asking about the stormwater. Can we put more money into that? And then, of course, I've got folks on the other side saying, well, you already got doubled last time. So can you speak to what are the constraints and or limits of where that money can go? I think that might kind of help direct future conversations.
Sure, thank you. Well, that obviously the stormwater management utility falls within the scope of municipal services provided to the Lakewood community. I hadn't quite thought about how that impacts the enterprise, which is described as a business within the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. That's the stormwater management utility. But I'd want to do a little bit more research. But I imagine that could be possible if it were a specific question and were of interest to the entire community. But I would be concerned about how that makes the city utility still a utility under the enterprise and so forth. We've had that discussion a few times over the years about how it would maintain its status, because there are many taxpayers who may or may not be receiving a benefit from the stormwater management utility whose refund might otherwise be going into it. So I'd want to do a little bit more analysis of that.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. Nice presentation. Different comments that have come to me, Larry, is that the narrative perhaps could include how would someone want their money to be returned to them? Has that ever been thought of, to include that on any of the surveys?
That hasn't been included in the surveys. There have been a few ideas that have been presented and described in terms of how the funds could be refunded. I will say that council has until October to decide how to proceed. We need to refund these monies, and there is a bit of a clock ticking. And certainly my job is to analyze options, present options, and help council understand how and when and best to do that. That's really my role. Some of the things discussed in the focus of the council in the past has been to make the refund in the most efficient, cost-effective, quick way possible. That's been the theme in the past, and that could continue. or something else could be done at your direction. My job then is to describe some of the strengths and weaknesses of that, or the cost of doing that, and other things have been described, like mailing checks or inviting people to City Hall to receive checks, or credits on electric bills, and a variety of different things. And I'm continuing to provide analysis on how that can work. And so, but no, to answer your question specifically, there hasn't been a question in the survey about how best to return the funds.
And in the past, it's been with the sewer or the stormwater fee, is that right?
Last year, it was a credit to property owners' property tax bill, and that's been the focus for a couple of years. Prior to that, it was a credit on property owners' stormwater management utility bill. And I think we've got that information out on the Lakewood Together website, some of the history of that, the dollar amounts, and so forth, just in terms of how that's been done. The reason for that approach, the reason council has been interested in doing that in the past, just a year ago in October, council approved that because it doesn't cost anything to make that credit. It's the most efficient, cost-effective way to do it, and 100% of the refund can be made that way.
Okay. I understand that there's really not a totally perfect way to do this, too. I mean, a lot of this is going to depend on what the language for any ballot initiative would say. I mean, we can go from 180 degrees the way this would be structured. On the past 4 ballot initiatives, it is my assumption, but I think we need to get it out there, that they were time limited and for specific projects. Talk to me about that.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go. Let me see if I can go through the 4. Let me get my recollection together. Just a moment. Yes, a Tabor exemption or relief from the revenue limits can be 1 year. It can be 3, 5, 10, whatever the voters decide, or it can be perpetual. So in the 90s, Lakewood voters authorized an exemption from the, may I say, Denver West area of the community forever. That was perpetual, and that was the first election that occurred. Then the next question occurred in the late 90s. I don't want to give you the date just so I don't get that crossed up. There was a 9-year exemption in Lakewood. That has since expired, of course. The third one...
And please talk a little bit more about what that one...
Sure. And you mentioned projects and so forth. At the time, I think this was voted on in 1999, and it was a 9-year exemption from revenue limitations. There wasn't a Tabor refund pending, unlike today. The council's focus at the time was we want to have a Tabor exemption. Whatever monies are developed, we will provide a report. There was no specifics such as law enforcement or whatever the case may be. But each year, council then authored a report describing where those funds were spent. And there was, of course, the 3 main businesses that the city is engaged in, which is public safety, parks, and transportation. Okay, and those reports are available and probably retained in the city clerk's archives. We could have those. The third exemption occurred with the city's increase in its rate of sales tax from 2% to 3%, and the new or the added sales tax was voted up and is exempt forever. So that was the third one. From 2% to 3%, the new amount was exempt forever. And then the fourth question in Lakewood's history was related to, let me back up. The increase in sales tax was you spend on parks, transportation, and public safety, of course. And then the fourth exemption was related to all open space revenues and grants for cultural activities, transportation, and let me get this one more time. Law enforcement, public safety, cultural activities, and transportation. And that was perpetual. That's forever as well. And there wasn't any pending refund related to that. Interestingly, the city is receiving grant funds related to its recent decision to acquire the Taylor property. We aren't doing an annual report on how much open space money or other grants that we're receiving, but those grants would have been limited by Tabor if that election hadn't otherwise been approved, and that was in 2006. Thank you.
Do you mind talking a little bit more about the Taylor property money that we'll be getting?
So our Parks and our Community Resources Department has applied for grants from Great Outdoors Colorado, Jefferson County Open Space, and others. I couldn't give you more detail on the grantors, but as those monies come in, they will not be refunded or limited by Tabor. They will be exempt pursuant to the 2006 election. Otherwise, those grants would have been limited and potentially refunded.
Well, it sounds like all of the 4 previous exemptions were structured very differently and in different context. Is that right?
I agree.
Yeah. Also, could we please get an example of the tweets that were put out there by the city in the Facebook? I'd like to know actually what it is that we've put out. I don't stay on top of tweets, to be honest with you.
I haven't seen them either, but we will share all of those with council. I can tell you that the theme is generally an invitation to participate in this Lakewood Together website and the community engagement. So, but we'll send on copies of those to council.
Might I interrupt? You were sent a report, I think on Friday, about 3-ish, and that information was included.
What information, Kathy?
It was sent by our Deputy City Manager, Ben Goldstein, and it has a list of all the information that was received.
It has the tweets and the Facebook.
Oh, the
posts.
tweets are in.
Yeah.
That's what you're.
The tweets, yes, sorry.
Okay, well, I somehow missed that tweet. Okay. Also, we've had a lot of things here that council has been looking at and dealing with and talking and getting input. One thing that we maybe should be considering would be some type of an evening or a forum or a study session, I don't know how you'd want to call it, where we would actually invite speakers that have different thought on Tabor. Has that ever been thought of?
I would just direct that to the mayor.
We're certainly going to look at having a League of Women Voters opportunity with all ballot initiatives, and if that's something that you wanted to try to do, I'd encourage you to fill out a council request form, and we can have that conversation on a different evening.
What kind of public input prior to the last 4 times that the city addressed the Tabor, what kind of public input did the city get at that point? Do you know? It's just probably before our time, Larry.
Yeah, also the technology was a lot different, obviously. We didn't have all these things, right? These ways of communicating with people. But I do recall newspaper articles. I do recall, and some of those are in the city clerk's archives. Certainly looking at Lakewood was much more visible in the public, and may I say the old methods of communicating with the public. And of course, public hearings and things of that nature. Mm-hmm.
Okay. The one thing with this that just feels a little off for me personally is that we as a city are driving the potential initiative rather than having it driven by the citizens as a referendum. Just throwing that out. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Great. And I'll just add to Council Member Abel's liking that this all came to fruition at our last planning retreat. So that's partly why it's being driven in this direction, because this was the direction that council had given staff. Ms. Harrison?
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Thank you, Mr. Dorr. I know in the past we've had a way of earmarking results of Tabor expenditures. Could you describe, because in the Ward 5 meeting that we had on Saturday, we kind of had a straw poll. Now, we made our straw poll really simple. We asked, should it be included on the ballot or leave it alone? And we had 60 people respond. 48 of them said, yes, it should be put on the ballot. 12 responded, no, leave it alone. So we didn't give them a direction. We didn't say anything about where it would go, but those were the results that came out. But a lot of the comments that we got at the meeting were, how are we going to know that that money gets spent for the right report? So what I know in your presentation, you said in the past there had been specific reports presented that showed where those Tabor expenditures. Would you go into a little bit more definition of how that would work should this be passed?
Sure. Let's see, in my experience, from the past, one of the things that council could direct the staff to do is relevant to 2005. In 2005, the citizens had similar concerns about the sales tax increase and where would those funds be spent and what guarantees are there and that kind of thing. And one of the things that this council could consider is doing something very similar, and that is approving 2 budgets. And that could be a very effective way because it really binds the council to what it's describing to the public. So in 2005, this is what was done. The city went in, and the city council, of course, is the only body that can make appropriations and decide spending for the city. Only the city council, not me or anybody else. And so the city would potentially, or in 2005, went through its ordinary budget process, assuming no changes and no change in the vote and all of this kind of thing. And authorized an ordinance and approved the ordinance, and the budget was finished. The council then could, at your direction, work up a second budget at the same exact time that says, if whatever's on the ballot, if it's on the ballot, if it's approved, we're gonna approve another ordinance and another budget that is contingent upon the approval of the ballot question. And then that really is council's commitment to the public that these are the exact same things. These are the exact things that will be approved. And then as a follow-on, as you know, part of the budget process at each year, I, with my colleagues in Public Works and the Police Department and in Community Resources, we always provide a report on projects and talk about things that are getting done. I mentioned earlier that, Lasley Park, that's really easy to sort of verify it's done, and, the amphitheater and things like that. So council could direct the staff to really work on 2 budgets, and that, I think, and approve an ordinance as well that's contingent upon anything being voted up. And then I think that's probably the greatest way to do what you're describing. And that was done in 2005.
Mr. LeBeer?
Director Dewar, it's always a pleasure to see you. I just wanted to see if you could go over briefly just sort of the process or the different things that we looked at on the committee, on the Budget and Audit Committee, of just other potential options that we looked at and how we sort of got to talking about Tabor. Would you mind doing that for us?
Sure. I think what you're referring to is that in the municipal funding process, presentations and things, what our leaders in our police department, Public Works, and Community Resources presented things to the city council that are not either programs that are being undertaken or projects that are not in our current capital improvement and preservation plan, to give an idea to the council and the public those kinds of amenities or choices that could be made in utilizing the refund. All of those things were really hypothetical, but an opportunity to start a conversation and get feedback from council and the community on what some of those things might be. Of course, as I said before, only council can ultimately decide those things. So, as you would guess, they were split pretty evenly across public safety, and it talked about increasing the number of police agents and increasing some of the equipment that the police use in their detective cars and other things. Then there were options for crosswalks and sidewalks and signals and XL lanes and decel lanes, things of the public works vein, if I could describe it. And then probably about a third for parks, recreation, open space type amenities. And of course, all of those are, as I say, hypothetical and could ultimately be directed, by the city council and the public. Does that help?
That helps, but I also just wanted, if you wouldn't mind sharing just how we looked at COPs and other options for the revenue side, and if you wouldn't mind sharing that.
Absolutely. I mean, all of this connects to, frankly, council's goal of identifying, I had to look at this, identifying strategies to pay for community needs. That's the goal of council. And so our exercise in, I think, April was also to talk about other ways to pay for community needs. And of course, as you saw earlier, our operating budget is 0.2%, quite frankly. So the city is living within its budget and providing services as directed by council and the public and so forth. But going beyond that, really it amounts to either a tax increase or Tabor refund or new debt. Those are really the main three that would give an opportunity for council to pay for community needs.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Okay, I have a couple more questions. They're actually clarifying questions as to some things that were asked. Ms. Franks inquired a little bit about enterprise, but as I heard the question, it was, could this money be used in the enterprise fund for stormwater? And my understanding is no, because you can only use 10% of outside funding in an enterprise fund, or else it loses its enterprise status. Is that accurate?
That I can tell you for sure, and that's why I'd want to do a little more analysis on sort of who's paid the taxes that'll be refunded, and can they be used in the enterprise fund and so forth. So I'd want to look at that a little bit more carefully and could report on that in the future.
And we talked about exempting. In the past, we've exempted different sources of grants and things like that. What is there an example today of money that we take in for services that isn't exempt? So potentially we're bringing in something for a service that we're providing and it's going back out.
Sure. Oh my gosh, I could give a lot of examples. I'll just try to do a few of them off the top of my head. So certainly recreation services, we're all familiar with that. You go to a recreation center, you pay a membership fee, or you buy a piece of equipment, whatever. All of those revenues are limited by Tabor. Of course, building permits, plan check fees.
How about police services? And I'm thinking along the lines of RTD.
So, for example, if a police officer provides extra duty coverage for a fee, that is limited as well. We provide fingerprinting services for the children or other job-related activities. Those revenues. So, I guess it's easier to describe what isn't limited than sort of what is. But licensing. Interest income.
In the past, we've had an example that our folks providing extra duty on the light rail receive a check from RTD, where we receive an annual check of $250,000 to $300,000, of which is not exempt. Is that
correct?
Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a few others.
Nope, that's cool. You're good. You talked a little bit about memorializing one budget. But if this group sent something to the ballot and the folks said 5 years, 10 years, how do we assure the community that beyond that one budget, those funds will go directly to what the community says they want them to go to?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are never any guarantees. I think it's been brought up before that the amount of the refund fluctuates from year to year. It can't be predicted within a dollar. It's not a guaranteed amount. It goes up and down. But of course, each year we could calculate it. We would calculate it for council and councils in the future in terms of what it is and how much it might be and those kinds of things. So just as sales taxes are volatile, property tax revenue goes up and goes down, then those things have to be dealt with as they come in the future. Just as with the increase in the sales tax rate, that amount goes up and down from year to year, and we have to keep track of that. So The city only does one-year budget at a time. That's pursuant to the city's charter. All appropriations expire after 1 year, and those are the constraints that we deal with. That's just one of the many things to contend with in that process.
However, today, does that 1% still go towards the things that were highlighted to the community when they passed the 1% tax increase?
It does. The amount available, of course, could fluctuate.
Sure. But that 1% still. So we would still be able to go to the community and say the Tabor refund beyond the 2016 number will always go to whatever is offered, those 3, 5, 1 things.
Absolutely.
And so that would be the kind of the check and balance with the community and council.
Indeed.
Okay. And then the last thing was just quick clarification on one of the previous renditions that we looked at with a third. We did have 10 police agents. And I've heard some feedback from the community. There's some hesitation about adding positions, knowing that that number is going to fluctuate. So how would we deal with that? Because I think there's a hesitancy to, start hiring and then it goes down and then we're laying people off. That's the last thing we want to do.
I agree. That is one of the challenges presented in all of this. Certainly if public safety and law enforcement is an interest and a need in the community, I would suggest the smallest amount possible is the most conservative, clearly. You wouldn't want to add 20, 30, 50 police agents, although you might be able to pay for that with a $12 million Tabor refund. That amount is going to go down, in my estimation, and that would be far too aggressive, and that scenario that you just described would very likely occur, quite frankly. But a smaller number would be more conservative, and maybe the idea is that a third of the refund is dedicated to law enforcement, public safety type activities, and to start small and increase over time and do that in a very conservative and thoughtful way.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Roybal?
Thank you, Mayor. Larry, great presentation. Just wanted to get some quick clarification. You had mentioned in the past we had refunded some money through stormwater and through property tax. That was the county property tax that we paid the county, and then that was our small portion of what we collected on property tax. Now, quick comment and question for you. Is there any other possible ways of doing a refund? For example, what was told to me by one of my constituents said possibly using Excel as a mechanism to do refunds, through the city of Lakewood. And the second one was through voter registration. Can you give us maybe, I don't want to put you on the spot, obviously, but can you give us a little bit if it's good or not good, or the pros and cons to those?
Sure. I've gotten a few emails from our Ward 3 council members on this subject, and I've responded to those, and certainly those are public. Anybody could see those. And I'll try to do this from recall. I beg your pardon. I don't have those messages right in front of me. But let's see. The first one is, let me just step back and say that Tabor itself does not describe how a refund should be made. It's really sort of wide open. And that's challenging because communities across the state have had to deal with that, and it's difficult. However, Tabor does describe that reasonable expenses can be deducted from the amount of the refund to pay for the implementation of the refund. It also describes it has to be done in a timely fashion. You can't wait, 5-10 years from now to make the refund. That Tabor is very explicit in that. But that's about where it ends. So let's see. Regarding the first idea, which is refunding via Excel, let me expand on the proposition, which was that a list of Xcel Energy customers would appear, and that then the city would use that list, and it presumably would have property address, and it would have the billing customer's name, and then the city could utilize that to make this Tabor refund, and it could be, let's say the list is 100,000 people. Council could decide to take $12,500,000 divided by 100,000 names and addresses, simple arithmetic, and make the refund less the cost to do that. A couple of things are interesting in that. One is Xcel Energy is a private company and in business for a profit, and on and on. My hunch would be, and I don't know this because I haven't reached out to Xcel, but my hunch would be that the company would probably have some customer privacy issues in providing a list of its customers to anybody else. So that for one might be kind of challenging. The other thing is that if the city is going to disperse checks to anybody for this refund, the city has to meet certain requirements for check issuance, and that is under Internal Revenue Code. We are required to issue a 1099 miscellaneous to anybody who gets a City of Lakewood check. So for example, we have over 2,000 vendors. We're purchasing gasoline and bulletproof vests and many different things as a city we're procuring, and anybody who is paid a check, we have to issue them a IRS Form 1099 miscellaneous, and that would have to be done in any instance where a check was issued. So that's a complicating factor that would require labor. Frankly, we would need to invite those Xcel Energy customers to provide information to the city that would allow us to then issue that check in a very proper way under all of the laws and codes and so forth to do that. I made some estimates of the cost, and I think it probably is going to take 15-20 minutes to process each one of those. I put a labor rate to it, and it came in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but that can be lawfully done as a deduct from the refund. And that's the same for asking voters to provide their information to the city, and then the city issuing a check to them in the mail.
So in essence, the most speediest, shortest way is just to stay within our system, like with stormwater, and go to the county and say, here, can we, credit this amount on their property tax? And the cost on that would be how much versus what we would have to pay if we use the other system?
The reason that to my knowledge, all Front Range cities who've made refunds have used the property tax. First of all, the Colorado Department of Local Affairs they provide the infrastructure, meaning the forms and the calculations that are performed to get the refund done through the county property tax. And essentially, it takes me and my staff a few hours to fill out the form, and that's the cost.
So then there wouldn't be a 1099 assessed to that?
No, because nobody's getting a check issued on a City of Lakewood bank account that they then take to the bank and cash for U.S. currency type thing. Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Gutwein?
Thank you. First, just wanted to thank you so much for the presentation tonight, but also over the course of the year, and then joining us at our ward meetings, giving people a chance to ask you questions. In Ward 5, we found it incredibly valuable and got a lot of great feedback about that. Also wanted to take just a moment to thank everyone who took the survey and took the time to do that and give your input, and who's here tonight. Really appreciate your time and your input, because at the end of the day, this is your money and you should decide what we do with it. So thank you. My question is, I want to understand what the process is going to look like going forward to determine ballot language that's very influential on how people feel about this and determines whether or not they want to see it on the ballot. And yeah, just how we're going to wheedle this all down in time for the ballot.
Let's see. All I can offer on that subject is that in order, Tabor requires any question related to Tabor to be a part of the general election. It can't be a part of a special election. In order for a question to be presented to Lakewood voters as a part of the general election in November, the city needs to coordinate with the county clerk to have a question placed on the ballot. The deadline for that would require a council action, a resolution, no later than council's meeting on August 27th. Beyond that, I really look to you, Mayor, and members of City Council, in terms of what that resolution might contain. That's where my job really ends.
And that's the goal of tonight's another opportunity to hear from the community, and then we will address this more in depth next Monday night.
And at that point, we'll be discussing the breakdown of funds and if we're going to have a sunset and all of that.
It's going to go to the ballot. It'll be the opportunity for everybody to bring their opinions.
Okay.
And suggestions.
And then the following meeting would be the actual
2 weeks after.
2 weeks after would be the following. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Dorr? Certainly. Mr. Skilling?
So if we did the municipal funding piece, I understand that there's certain projects that would be specific, maybe on the second budget thing that you were talking about. Is the money siloed so that if the money comes in off the Tabor refund and it's used for a municipal project that was specifically voted on by the voters, does that money stay siloed there? Does that make sense?
Yes, we're very good at accounting and very transparent in that process. So we would be able to show down to the dollar funds retained, funds spent, and all of those appropriations would be authorized by City Council. Yes.
What if there's an issue with one of those projects and we've got an overage of some kind, and something that should have cost $100,000 now costs $200,000? Is there prohibitions within Tabor as to where other money could come from? Because remember, you're going to have to take from another silo then.
Sure.
If the projects were approved and the money's all siloed, how do you account for budgeting inaccuracies?
Sure. Let's see. Tabor does not describe that in any way. Let me tell you that factually. And I could also say I've never seen a project that didn't have issues. Projects always will have underruns or some overruns, and we'll have to manage those as they come. And typically the way we do that is through contingencies within given projects. Rule of thumb is 10% would typically be there. And then we would have the output at the end, which describes a certain project was under budget. That's typically our goal, and then there would be some leftovers, for lack of a better description, that could be reappropriated for similar type projects, and maybe other capital project funds could be used. So you're right, these silos, they're very important, and we're very good at accounting for them, and very transparent as well. That's I think the key. And many times the cost overrun is due to unforeseen circumstances when you're getting into construction, or maybe an opportunity to add a change order that really makes sense for the community. Those are all really fluid, but I think have to be, as you said, siloed appropriately. And again, Tabor doesn't describe any of that, but it's sort of similar to the existing appropriations that City Council makes for any construction project. Things come up and we deal with those as they come along and do it in a very transparent way.
And even if it's a Tabor project, and you just mentioned change order, so would the change order, we have the discretion then, once it's been approved, project A has been approved by the voters as a specific municipal funding they wanted to see. Okay? If there's going to be a change order to that, we have full discretion to change the direction of that? Or what are our constraints? Now that we've asked the people, they've said, yes, this specific project, we want the $12.5 million, a portion of it, to go there. Now, what happens with that project? What are the parameters? And I mentioned the budgeting piece, but you've now mentioned the change order piece. So who gets to decide what that change order looks like?
This is what I've seen in the Lakewood history, and then also in other communities across the Front Range, is typically a ballot question describes broadly public safety, parks and recreation, and transportation. Otherwise, the council is going to have to describe within 21 days those exact projects to the nth degree. I don't think that's probably likely. I think that's probably infeasible or very, very challenging at the very least. So as you look at ballot questions across the Front Range and in Jefferson County, they tend to be pretty general in terms of public safety, transportation, and community resources, or parks and recreation, parks and open space, whatever it might be. The next step, however, is for council to potentially adopt a budget that sets forth the really fine details of what would be a contingent approved budget. And then just like any budget, the budgets get revised for those exact things that you describe, and council has the opportunity to control those very carefully. So I think that's probably the best reason for this appropriation, type budget that really is transparent and helps the community understand what it's voting for.
Mr. Abel.
A follow to that, when we label silos, as you put it, we label one public safety. We did that with the sales tax increase a few years back. People thought, well, if we're giving half of this to public safety, then we're going to have more police and more police equipment. They didn't realize it also extended to snow plowing, replacement of stop signs. There are so many things in the city that can be considered public safety related that it doesn't restrict us very well in how we spend that money. So there are still lingering feelings in the community about that. I think the more detailed we can be, the better off we are, or at least instead of a broad category of public safety, we could do police agency expenditures, label them somehow that way. If street sweeping is that important to other folks, then maybe, we could invite them to urge us to put street sweeping in there. But will we in the next meeting then be talking about categories in the next discussion of where this money goes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. Dorr, I'm going to follow up to Mr. Skilling's question. I think where we're going is if there was a project listed, if we went with some projects, it was $2 million, but it actually turned out to be $3 million. Where would that delta come from?
Well, that's quite a delta, first of all. I don't recall having that issue in the past. But to answer your question, what I would envision, just as with any project, council approved $1.2 million for Lasley Park. And excuse me, if that were, if the city staff were, and of course the design of Lasley Park, just to make this more vivid, Mayor, the design of Lasley Park was a very involved community outreach effort for many months that described the design and what it might look like. Now, if the city staff, with the appropriation and the plan and all that, went out to a bid for the project and it came in at $2.2 million, I can tell you that would involve a re-engagement of the city council to say, first of all, how could we be so far off, which didn't happen, thankfully. And then two, here's why, and here's what's necessary. We can either carry forward, we can go forward and do the $2.2 million project, or here's what a $1.2 million project really has to look like now, and we should probably re-engage the community. So it probably wouldn't surprise you that would be the outcome.
And that is a big number, and I know from my experience we haven't. But you could also, because you had a silo, you could still have the opportunity. It's not an enterprise fund, so you could certainly come from the general fund to shore that up for completion or go into reserves or something along those lines to make it whole. There's nothing that would prohibit that.
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Franks?
I just wanted to comment, if we were off that much, that project manager needs to be fired. But besides that point, did want to make sure that obviously when you're looking at the fiscal management, just wanted to make sure the audience was aware, you're looking at the scope, the schedule, the cost, and you're looking at the quality. And those are kind of the four pillars. And so you're giving and taking upon those. If you're looking at, you're going to have a cost underrun, and you're looking to that you might have had a parking lot wish list. If you're having a schedule, is that really, does that change the cost appreciably, yes or no? Sometimes the schedule's the one thing that can slip. Quality, an increase in the quality of the materials, a decrease in the quality of the materials. Again, so there's a lot of different ways to slice that. But what I'm hearing from the community, what I wanted to get out there is that I'm not sure people are wanting to slice down to the project level. I think it's broad categories like acquisition of new open space, or public safety for specific gear for our police officers to ensure their safety. So I'm hearing these broader. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. But again, if, on the project management side, there's a lot of ways to true that up. There's contingency budget, management budget, risk management. All those things come into play. So we would want to have, obviously, we have professional staff who take care of that and monitor those 4 pillars very carefully.
Well said. Thank you. All right. So we'll go back to public input. If you haven't signed up to speak, please do so now or forever hold your peace. And Mr. Dorr, thank you.
Until next week.
Until next week. And same rules apply. 3 minutes, 2.5 green, 30 seconds yellow, and red after that. And if you signed up and you don't want to speak, but you want to say thumbs up, thumbs down, we'll accept that from the gallery as well. Getting warmed up. That's why I thank Mr. Abel for letting me inject another comment. Thank you, Miss Millard. Okay, first up we had Mr. Gomez, and it looks like he left. Got here to sign up first and left early. Eva, come on down. Good evening.
Eva Frickle, Ward 4. You have my address.
We got you.
All right, I'm hoping I can read my own handwriting, but I'm not guaranteeing anything. Firstly, I just wanted to say I think the surplus should go to the ballot. It should go on the ballot. I mean, I've been to various ward meetings, Ward 4, Ward 5. There's been a lot of discussion about the surplus and what should be done with it. A very vocal and, quite frankly, aggressive minority saying, I want my money, give it to me now. And if I have to say, if they are so sure that they are speaking for everybody in our wards, they should let it go to the ballot. Because if they think they're going to win, what are they afraid of? So I think that people should be entitled to vote. And I'm also going to speak as a property owner, because we're the ones who are going to benefit most likely, because it is the most efficient way to return the money. I don't think that's fair. The money comes from, I understand correctly, is sales tax. Renters pay sales tax. People who work in Lakewood but don't live here pay sales tax. In order to return it at the most equitable level, I think investing in the community is the way to go. More open spaces. I know some of you, that's a pet project. I go for that. More open spaces, more parks. As addressed earlier in the meeting, Ward 1 is deficit in number of parks. That would be an opportunity to address that balance, because Ward 4 rocks it when it comes to parks. We're really great. That's about it, really. Thank you.
Thank you. So then I have Kim Netherton, and then Joan Jacobson, and then Scott Kiersgaard, and then Mike Moeller.
Hi, everyone. You have my...
Yep, we got you.
That's awesome. So, hi, my name is Kim Netherton. I've been a resident here in Lakewood since 2007. I'm a member of the working class. I make below the national average. I have little to no retirement, and I've rented the same house here in Lakewood for the last 11 years. In fact, 2 of my 3 children were born right there in my living room. I'm also a local Girl Scout leader, and I am a state board member of Working Families Colorado. I am here in support of adding the debrucing ballot issue to November's ballot. One of the key tenets of Tabor is the involvement of the voting public in issues of government revenue collection and spending, and that's exactly what this boils down to. Are you, representatives elected by Lakewood's voters, willing to support our right to decide what happens to the taxes we have already paid? This ballot issue would not increase our taxes, nor would it prevent us from voting to increase our taxes in the future. I was nowhere near old enough to vote for Tabor in 1992, but I am now very much old enough to feel the effects of Tabor. The intersection of Tabor and Gallagher has created a no-win situation for those of us who live and work and raise families here in Lakewood. I've watched the steady decline of the quality of our streets and local parks. the inability of our police to address the concerns of our community in a timely and effective manner, and the exponential boom of private land development. And I've heard my neighbors complain from across the political spectrum about what feels like to them a city who is uninterested and unwilling to mitigate these issues. What my neighbors and so many of Lakewood's residents do not always understand is that Tabor's ratchet effect is hobbling our access to basic city services. We all want better roads and sidewalks, nicer parks, fewer private developers, and increased public safety. But because of Tabor's limits, you all have to prioritize those needs. And too often, working families like my own, who do not have the time and the resources to come to council meetings and ward meetings, are left underrepresented, underserved, and bearing the brunt of budget shortfalls. We also want you to consider the method of our current Tabor refund mechanism. As it stands, the city collects sales tax revenues from everyone who purchases goods here in Lakewood. When the revenues exceed these Tabor's cost, as Tabor caps, as you heard, the excess is typically refunded to property tax owners as a property tax refund. How is this fair? It's not. Nearly 50% of Lakewood's residents are renters. And unless we have a unicorn landlord, which I do not have, we will never see a single penny of the sometimes $16.8 million refund that goes back to property tax owners. Now, the people who do own property who get that, maybe as a residential owner, you get about $10 a month, $100 a year in your refund. The ones who get the most, Walmart, Target, King Soopers. These companies who already post billions of dollars in profit annually are making the most money off of these refunds, but they're not putting anything back into our communities. And that's not okay. So we, the working class of Lakewood, and our families would very much like you guys to consider placing debrucing on the ballot so that we, the people of Lakewood, can decide what happens to the money that we have already spent and that should go to our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Joan, and then Scott Kiersgaard, and then Mike Mueller, and then Lois Whitty. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Joan Jacobson. I live in Ward 2 at 1836 Dover Street. And since I heard about this, I've been thinking about what I might do with this refund. Maybe a dinner with some nice wine. Maybe a pair of shoes. But you know what? There are things I need way more than another dinner and a pair of shoes. What I really need is a safe sidewalk along Colfax so that I don't twist my ankle on the busted asphalt when I walk to the light rail. But $120 isn't going to get me a safe sidewalk. And I think about the police. I need the police every day to protect myself and my property. And I want our Lakewood police to have up-to-date equipment. So my refund of about $120, what would that buy? Maybe a radio? But if we pitch in together as citizens of Lakewood, I can get a safe sidewalk and police. I also enjoy our parks. You know, when I was a young mom, that's where I met my neighbors. Our kids became friends. But what mom or dad wants to take their kid to a playground with a dilapidated playground equipment? So what would my $120 pay for? It's not going to buy new playground equipment, maybe one-time mowing. But if we partner up as citizens of Lakewood, we can have parks that are maintained, upgraded, and added to, like this awesome idea I heard here tonight, a park near Westland. So the great thing about city services is that they're for everybody. We all need sidewalks. We all need police. We all can enjoy parks. But none of us as individuals can pay for city services our individual selves. So together, we have the money. So let's not dribble it away. Let's make Lakewood a better city for everybody and keep me out of a cast when I walk to the light rail. But lastly, in response to Councilwoman Johnson's comment, I'm here tonight as a citizen. I voted for some of you. I voted for you to make good decisions for the city of Lakewood. I'm glad council brought this up because that shows that you guys are doing the job that you were elected to do. And as a citizen, I say thank you, and thank you for listening to me tonight.
Thank you. Come on down. All right. Then I have Mike Mueller, Lois Whitty, and Scott McKay.
We'll try to move fast, right?
You're good.
I've owned a house in Lakewood for about 14 years in Ward 1. I also own another house there as a rental. I'm a real estate agent. I drive around looking at houses all the time. I've looked at thousands of houses with I have no idea how many people. They don't ask about property taxes very often. They ask about libraries. They ask about schools. They ask about paths, walking paths and bike paths. They ask about public safety, crime. Those are the things that home buyers care about. Property taxes in Colorado are the 10th lowest in the country, and our housing prices are the 5th highest. And still, our taxes are way down there. I'd love a refund. I hate paying taxes. I love putting money in my pocket. And Kim's right. I'm not going to give that to my renter. I'll keep it. And, you know, that would be jolly. But that's not the right thing to do. We have so many needs in this community, and I live here because it's a great place to live. I don't live here so I can keep an extra $200 a year or whatever. That's not what draws people here. They're drawn here by the quality of life, and that requires investment in infrastructure. Both police and bike paths are huge to me, and they're huge to a lot of the people I show houses to. They always want to know, where's light rail? Where's the bike path? Where's the park? Where's the library? That's what people want to know. That's why they moved to Lakewood. In the spirit of Tabor, put it on the ballot. That's what Tabor's about, giving taxpayers a choice. And the only reason not to put it on the ballot is if you're afraid it will pass. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Mueller, Lois Whitty, Scott McKay, and Mike Schumann. Good evening.
Good evening, guys. Mike Mueller. Some of you have heard this little story, but it just puts everything in perspective. If you go to a gas station and you give a guy $50, and you're going to fill your car up, and he used $30, and you go back in there and you say, I want my change. And he says, well, no, I'm going to keep it because I can spend it better than you. I deserve it. Well, I don't think so. But that puts everything in perspective. Well, who's the money belongs to is the people. I was at the Mills, and Dana, I hate to say this, but we're going to agree on something. I was at the Mills, and I was standing in line at one of the shoe stores up there, and there was this family that came in with 4 kids. And you could tell they weren't real high maintenance people. And when they saw the bill, the parents just swallowed because they had over $220 just in shoes. And then they said, where are we going to go to get all the stuff we need to get for school? And they're sitting there, they were dumbfounded. They could clothes, school, where are we going to get the money? Then I saw a thing on TV, senior that had a 5-year lease on their house, an old beat up house. The landlord was a slumlord. He hadn't done a thing on it. You know, their rent was, I think, $250 or $300 a month. Cheap. One bedroom, 1 room house. It was just junk. He jacked the price up over $1,200. Seniors, all they want to do is eat. Some seniors in our neighborhood, all they want to do is eat. Some of these families, you're saying it's just $125, but some of these seniors can live on $125 for the month. That's what they eat with. Some of the low-income people, you don't think that a husband and wife get a $350 check You don't think that'd go a long ways for them? Especially at school time or lunchtime or, just living. Maybe here's a shocker. How about paying their stormwater fee bill? Oh, that'd be a shocker, wouldn't it? You give us the money and then we got to pay the stormwater fee back. The question should be not how you can keep the money. The question should be, how do you get it to the people that need the money? Now, I plan to do one thing with my refund. I'm going to donate it to Teen Challenge. And specifically 160, because all they do is handle drug and alcohol abuse for kids. And they have an excellent record. But that is my decision. That should be your decision. You should be donating to these people, these places that are doing so much good. Donating to the city of Lakewood that has a $30 million budget balance, they don't need the money. Teen Challenge needs the money. Low-income families need the money. Some seniors need the money, especially in Ward 1 and Ward 2. You know what I'm talking about. I find it even hard to imagine that you would even ask the question to keep the money. It boggles my brain when you got $30 million in the bank, and you're all worried about it's only 3 months. Well, that 3 months that you have, if we lost 10% in our revenue, would still be years and years down the road before the city was in trouble. And $212,000, less than 1% of the budget. You can't cut 1% of the budget to stay in balance. Oh boy, we need a new city auditor if that's the case. But that's my suggestions. That's what I'm going to do with my money. And anybody else who wants to donate with me, I would be happy to take the check down with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Lois? And then Scott, Mike Schuman, Roger Ball. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Lois Whitty. I'm a property owner as well, live in Ward 1. I want to thank the council for bringing this issue to the public. I do think it's a great thing that the council did there, and I'm very supportive of putting this on the ballot. It is an issue that does belong to the people, and I think if the people don't want to give the money back, the vote will tell. If people want to give the money back, the vote will tell that. Let the people talk and speak. For myself, I would encourage the council to draft it in a way that gives the council the most discretion within, the parameters of the 3 police, open space. I love open space. So that's a big issue on my heart. But, I'm not looking at all the competing needs. And I think it's important for somebody that makes this decision to do that, because it may be most important to put the money somewhere that I would have no idea that that's a critical priority, yet it is. So I encourage you to put it on the ballot, give yourself broad discretion, and de-Bruce forever. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McKay. And then Mike Schuman, Carol Baum, and then Lynn Judson. Good evening. Welcome.
Mayor, Council. Thank you for having me here tonight. I recently got the newspaper, the city newspaper, and I was a little disappointed that it seemed like the city took one side and said, how do we keep and spend the refund? I was kind of surprised they didn't ask us, how can we give this refund back to the people? And it just looked very biased to me. Perhaps it could be many good ideas I've heard tonight. The stormwater fee, or gosh, there's been a lot of good creative ideas how to give that money back. And I really don't think it's right that the city picks one side. It looked very one-sided to me. I guess there's a bicycle group that's holding its meetings on city property talking about debrucing or detabering, and and they're advocating for this. I don't think that's right on city property. You know, would a anti-tabor or detabor group get the same kind of treatment? I'd just like to say, please give the taxpayers their refund. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for coming out. Mike, Roger Ball, Carol Baum, Lynn Judson. Good evening. Welcome.
Mike Schumann, 888 South Alkire. I'm here to talk about the Tabor. I understand that a lot of that money, the excess money, is because of the 2017 hailstorm. That storm caused a lot of hardship for me, a lot of hardship for my neighbors. You know, we had broken windows, our roofs were wrecked. It destroyed my brand new barbecue grill. You know, and we had to pay deductibles on our insurance to get all this stuff fixed. So, you know, that money cost us quite a bit. I don't know about you guys, but I don't budget for deductibles. So I'd like to get some of that money back instead of the city profiting from my hardship. Others I know had to put their deductibles on credit cards, and they've been paying interest on that. I'm sure they'd like their money back. I think it's just wrong that the city's going to profit from the hardship of the citizens and the taxpayers. Bill of Rights allows the city to give back that money that they need to spend to repair their lives. I've also heard the argument that the money to each individual is insignificant compared to what the city can do with that lump sum. I think that the people that argue that should count their blessings and donate that money back to the city. But I work with about 40 people that make between $12 and $16 an hour. You know, they sometimes come to the office and ask to borrow $20 on a Friday to make it to payday. That $20 has to last 5 days. Payday's Wednesday. So they're using $20 to get through 5 days. I don't know about you guys, but I couldn't possibly do that. I mean, for citizens like that, $60, $80, that's going to be a new bicycle for their kid. It's going to be a trip to Elitch's for them. It's going to be new shoes, new clothes. I think you guys probably have some type of demographics on the income level of the Lakewood citizens and how many people this would definitely benefit. I ask that you don't put the refund on the ballot and return the money to the people as the law intended.
Thank you. Mr. Ball, and then Ms. Baum, Ms. Judson, Ms. O'Neill, Mr. Clough, and then Ms. Menton. Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. And good evening. My name's Roger Ball. Some of you know me. I've lived in Lakewood for over 40 years. I'll give you a little background on me. I'm a graduate of the Colorado School of Mines. I've been in the engineering profession for over 40 years. And from that, I want to go to 2 weeks ago when we had a big, huge downpour on Green Mountain. I've actually seen that before. It was something else. The water came down my street, over the curb, into my driveway. Rocks, dirt. It was way over the curb, coming down into the driveway. My wife and I happened to be there at the time to keep the water away from the building. We spent an hour doing that with shop vac and towels and everything we could do. We got as much as we could, all of it we couldn't keep away from the building. I have also learned since then that several of my neighbors up there have had damage too, flooding in basements. I've seen, and I've taken some pictures of it, which I can provide to council. Ladies and gentlemen, storms like these are going to be more likely than less likely. We're in the middle of global warming here in this world, and it's going to be here for a while. And if you read the reports, it says we're going to have weather extremes, not just hot weather, but weather extremes. And these are things that will be tough. So with this in mind, I would like the council to seriously consider using a portion of this $12 million of the Tabor money to upgrade our stormwater system. And what I've done since that storm, I have gotten some engineering information from the city's website. I have also contacted the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District, and I'm working with one of their engineers over there. I've done a preliminary analysis myself, and it looks like there's a problem up there. Now, what I'd like to do is put together a final report using those resources and submit it for the council to consider. And again, what I'm focusing on is a way to use some of this Tabor money to upgrade the stormwater system up there, and without doing new taxes or new stormwater fees. I don't know how that all works. I'm kind of ignorant of that at this point. But I think this is going to be something we're going to be facing year after year. Boulder's gone through it, Lyons went through it in 2013, and it can be very expensive for all of us. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Ms. Baum? Ms. Judson, O'Neill, Clough, and Menton.
Mayor and city councilors, I'm concerned about what is taking priority as far as spending in our city. I'm afraid that taxpayer money is going for things that are necessary, like lawsuits against citizens, various studies that have been done, exorbitant salaries for upper management. I'm sure there's other areas that can be looked at to see where some of the unnecessary spending is going. I feel that if the city would spend the money it has on the essential services it should provide for the residents in Lakewood, then the city would have enough money without having to ask the taxpayers for more money. For this reason, I would strongly encourage you to give the $12.5 million back to the taxpayers so that we can use the money however we may see fit. I also, Ramey Johnson addressed this. I often wondered why, when you have issues that you're addressing, that you only address one side of the issue and you don't let the opposing, viewpoint addressed. So I think that would be a good thing to do. So that this would, because it would be fair and it would better inform the public. And if Tabor does go to a vote of the people, the Strategic Growth Initiative should be on the ballot also. I would like an update on why it is still in the court. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. O'Neill? Oh, I'm sorry. Lynn, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor.
And then Ms. O'Neill.
City Council members.
Sorry.
I think that if this is put on the ballot, which I support, I think it's very important that a few questions be answered. There's a few things that are very confusing to me. If these are, I have a list of services it says, what could lifting Tabor limits pay for? So if you lift the limits and the city keeps more funds, then they are going to, presumably they could fund, although it doesn't say they will. So my question is, first of all, can we be assured of what will happen to the money that is retained if we vote to lift the limits? I would like to have that clarified on the Lakewood website, and perhaps City Council needs to decide, are these the things that are listed on the sheet for public safety, quality of living, and quality transportation? Are these things definitely going to be the things that are funded? No, is what some people say.
So I'll address that after public comment.
Okay.
That's just
So
a-
I want to
that's a
clarify
starter.
what the money would be spent for if the city did retain some of the Tabor, what would be the refund? And secondly, conversely, I should say, if it is not lifted and the citizens get a refund, is it seriously considered that we won't have these things? Will we still get some of these things? Because these seem very essential. I think police funding is absolutely essential. I think we should ask the police department which things are highest priority, and that we should definitely fund these things for a safe community, whether or not, no matter what happens to Tabor. We need to do this. I mean, why are these things the things that are only going to happen if the city retains the refund? These need to be things addressed anyway. I can personally tell you that one of the intersections I'm concerned about is Quality Transportation Option 5, that we need a traffic signal at West Florida Avenue and South Union Boulevard. That's near that Little King Supers and the road that leads down there. There's a lot of traffic, and now that there's more on Union, I mean, we're just waiting for a fatal accident there. We need this, whether Tabor, whatever happens to the Tabor funds. So I'm just saying that we need clarification on how the money would be spent if the city retains it, and if they do not retain it and the citizens get a refund, which of these options is going to be funded. I'm very confused about this, and I think we need to definitely keep our community safe, keep our transportation system safe, and fund our parks. But why do we have to do it with the Tabor money? That's what I don't understand. Okay, thank you.
All good questions. We'll get as many answered as we can. Miss O'Neill, then Mr. Clough, then Ms. Menton. Good evening.
Good evening. Do you want my name and?
No, we got you. Thank you.
Okay. Your financial person's presentation was very impressive. He said 700 people indicated that the city should keep the money. However, he did not say how many people had indicated that that the money should be returned to the people. I did not take the survey, so therefore I don't know if it allowed for this. I'm sure that he realizes that the 700 is not representative of the whole of Lakewood. And I would hope that decisions are not made on such a minuscule number. I personally don't know why we're even talking about this and why you want to put it on the ballot. The money belongs to the people. I don't care whether it's $1, $50, whatever. Do the right thing. Give the money back to the people. Secondly, I know from experience with the council that it does not matter what the people want. You are going to vote for it whether we want it or not. We have experienced this previously. So I guess what I want to say is if you know that you have a majority, stop wasting our time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Ross, come on down. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I am Ross Clough. I've been a City of Lakewood resident since 1998, and there's a couple of things I'd like to point out on this whole Tabor debrucing ballot initiative thing that's been going on. First of all, I'd like to echo a couple of earlier speakers that hailstorm back in 2017, it was the nastiest storm that I have ever seen since I've been in Colorado, and I've lived in Colorado since 1982. It was basically, if you had a car outside, it was totaled. I mean, that's how devastating it was. And I got lucky. I got spared, but a lot of my neighbors did not, and had to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to get roofs fixed, mailboxes fixed, siding fixed. I mean, the list goes on and on. So I'm definitely very interested in finding a way to return the money to the people that got hit by that storm. Second of all, on the survey, I definitely like the idea of having a community survey. I participated in it. A couple of questions that I wish were on it is, and one was talked about earlier, is how to refund the money. I definitely agree that that should have been on the survey. And the second question that I would have liked to have on the survey is how can the city actually save money without increasing taxes? And I would have really enjoyed that, to have that on the survey. I have a couple ideas that could help. One, the city of Westminster and El Paso, Texas are actually both doing, and that is do an extended 4-day work week. So instead of doing like a 5-8-hour work week schedule, you do a 4 10-hour work week. And where that would help you is it'd save you on lighting bills, air conditioning, heating, and that's money that's just being wasted right now. And that could be used for a lot of different things that people were talking about earlier. Item number 2 is this, we haven't seen as much in this area, but it's a technique called asphalt pavement recycling. And what that does is it's a fairly large machine that you bring over some areas that need street maintenance with the alligatored streets and that sort of thing that we see all over. And what that does is instead of having to rotomill the street, get rid of the asphalt pavement, come in with new asphalt, repave, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of money and all that. It's just one step. The asphalt that's there stays in place, and they add a bunch of tar and that sort of thing to it. And you actually get a fairly brand new looking street and performing street doing that. So that's another potential option, but there's tons of different options. So I would have really liked to see that in the survey, and that wasn't in there. One other thing I'd just like to mention real briefly is citizens of Lakewood and Colorado and whole have been seeing a lot of nickel and dime tax increases over the years. And just one example, the next election, we're probably going to be seeing a mill levy increase with urban drainage from 0.58 to 1.0. So that's a fairly large increase there. School district, they're probably going to do their mill levy increase. And it's a potential of a income tax increase. One other thing that nobody really talks about a whole lot is these trade tariffs that are going on are actually increasing inflation. So every single good and service we're buying is costing more money because of that, and that hurts everybody. So that's just another thing I'd like people to keep in mind. So my recommendation is to return the money and try to find a way to return it to the people, especially the people hit by the storm.
Right. So, thank you. Thanks for coming out. Ms. Menton, come on down. I didn't figure you'd have anything to say about this, so.
I wasn't going to hold my peace. How do I get that thing on?
We'll turn it on for you.
Thank you very much. And I'll figure out which is the right way to put it. Which way am I supposed to do it? There you go. Okay. All right. So first we're going to start with Natalie Menton, Ward 5. First of all, RTD. Lakewood PD, Lakewood City Council, is the only one of the agencies that we deal with that requires that we pay it to the city. I don't know why that is, but we actually have to pay RTD taxpayers, funders, all of that, pay an additional $2 per hour extra above the $40 per hour that we pay the off-duty police officers. So if you want to remove that from the Tabor revenue, I don't know what is stopping the city, because Denver doesn't do it, Aurora doesn't do it. I know you had mentioned that, so keep that in mind, please. And I looked up the Chief Tarbert's email from the other night when I heard that come up. Be happy to forward that to you. The way I look at this issue is in the same way that we have a wide variety of opinions on the limited growth issue, right? For me, it was about property rights. It was about voters having the ability to dictate property rights of individuals here in Lakewood. I view the Tabor refund as my property, not community property. It's each individual citizen here. It's their property. By putting it to a vote, you're allowing the 51 people in a room of 100 to say, what's going to be done with my property? I have an issue with that. I think there is a solution. There are folks in the room here who are happy to let their money go to another park or a street or something else. There are some who want that money for whatever reason it may be. There are people in our community that, trust me, as I've talked to people out there, you cannot imagine the ways that this would, even if it's a smaller amount of money, how it will help them. And we'll be sharing those stories with the community. And by the way, I was kicked out of Clemens Rec Center, Senior Center, going to ask some folks about this initially. I was told this was soliciting when I was asked their opinion. I think there is a solution that would make everybody happy, and that is why I wanted to put this piece of paper up here and describe the situation. I believe one of the most fair ways to do this would be to get the list of the voters here in Lakewood. And I've already done the legwork on this. And what I did is I took the latest list of voters in Lakewood as of June 30th. I then bumped it up against the list, if you know data, you know what that means, of those who also lived here mid-year last year. So out of that, I was able to generate a list of 93,000 people and some change who had lived here roughly a year. So we know they generated part of this Tabor revenue, and they're still living here. We have their address, we have their name, we have their voter ID. Anytime you do a database, you want a unique identifier. That's their voter ID number. Why do we need the voter ID number? Because I would like the city to use our Looking at Lakewood to publish a notice in this fall's edition. And instead of pushing to keep the Tabor refund, what they'll state to the citizens is, for those who want to contribute it back to the city, you have until December 31st to go to a portal on lakewood.org, look up your voter ID, which you can do by going to govotecolorado.com. You will punch in your voter ID, and Lakewood will already have this unique identifier because they have access to the voter rolls. The person can go there before you even send out refund checks and say, I want the city of Lakewood to keep my refund, and on that portal is going to be a little checkbox. Here's where I want my money to go. Parks, streets, police, all of the above. Before we even send out the checks, we have a list of people who want the city to keep it. Great. Now, by default, oh, I'm out of time. Okay. One more sec. Okay. Okay. So
finish your
same
thought.
thing.
Finish your
By default, the checks then go out to the voters. The voter gets a 3-part check right here. Top part, paid to Natalie, signed by City Council. Bottom portion, dear Lakewood resident, you can return this check. Return it and mark what you want the money to go for. Everybody's happy. Thank you.
Go ahead and do this if you want. There's that. All right. Great. Thank you all very much. Very thoughtful public feedback tonight, so we really appreciate that. And I want to touch on a couple of things. Mr. Clough, if you have, council would probably be more than happy to hear some of your ideas. And maybe we're already doing them. I know we do some different things with asphalt, so please send us an email. We'd love to hear some different things that you have going on. The list that is there, where's Lynn? Is Lynn still here? Okay. The list that was presented. So when council began this discussion, it started with 3 tiers. One was the lower tier of the $12.5 million, and then we went with a second tier, which was the $12.5 million and COPs, and then the third tier, which was potential municipal bonding, COPs, and the refund. This was all accumulated from a list from all the departments of things that are needed or important. And so the list was huge for all 3 of them. Then it was culled down for the 2 and then brought down to what basically $12.5 million could provide if that's exactly the route council wanted to take with that. And will that stuff get funded? It will eventually, right? That's part of the budget, and that was my understanding from the presentations from Mr. Dorr, that eventually that stuff will be funded. This would be an acceleration of that. And now I've heard, and I think you've heard tonight, council wants to have a discussion, and so that isn't what would be presented. Maybe it will be after next week, but you're going to be able to hear next week more of kind of the whole body decision of where they want to go. Do they want to go project specific? Do they want to go to a proportional amount? Do they want it to all go to one thing, or do they want it to go nowhere? So that'll really be where we go from next week, and this was the opportunity tonight to have another hearing on that. So I want to be careful. I don't want to get in too much engagement from the dais, but I thank you. So these are priorities. Mr. Doran, if you want to elaborate a little bit more. I mean, these are things that are important. We are a safe community. You know, we have all those attributes, but these are things that we could accelerate, things that are going to be needed. Mr. Dorr?
Let's see. So my recollection of the basket of projects and so forth is first, in the area of police agent count or police agent services, I don't think that an additional 10 agents necessarily will be added at any time in the future. Certainly that's council's prerogative to juggle the priorities of the community, but you just saw the city's operating surplus of $211,000. It's just not the capacity to add to our base of 275 police agents. So that's that programming dimension of things. In terms of the capital projects don't exist in the current 5-year plan. They may or may not become a part of the plan in the future, but they certainly wouldn't be done in the next 5 years within the capital improvement and preservation plan. So, again, that's, as you said, that could accelerate those things from not being on the plan at all to being on the plan next year, or maybe some of them, might not ever make it onto the plan. That's sort of to be determined in the coming number of years.
Okay. So, okay, all right.
But I imagine certain of those facilities will eventually, either have to be removed or rehabilitated in some fashion. But yes, we'd make that change sooner.
But these priorities weren't just, hey, just pick some things that you want. I mean, these are on a list for a reason.
Clearly, I think, as I mentioned in my presentation, our three leaders in the organization, our police chief, public works director, and community resources director, very thoughtfully with their staffs looked at community needs that have been identified. For example, I think I referenced our recent community resources outreach to the public, Lakewood priorities in the community resources area. They took feedback from those on things like restrooms, park, playgrounds, and things like that. So I think I mentioned one of the things I remember from one of my earlier presentations was the spray ground slide that I had, and that's an amenity that's not a current part of our plan, but something that could be brought to bear in some of our community parks.
All right, so the long and the short of it is some of those might be on future budgets, some of them may not. It may accelerate some, but ultimately what this body discusses and decides next week, we'll get to either a more defined list, a list that exists, or percentages, or nothing. So I would encourage you to stay tuned on that. And before I go to some questions or comments from council, I had one more. Mr. Ball, I'm glad that you are working with urban drainage. I appreciate that. And if you maybe just want to give your contact information to the gentleman in front of you, we can make sure that you have the right folks at the city as you are inquiring about the storm issues up there. So, yep. Great. All right, council. Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. I'm intrigued by Natalie's proposition. It seems to help with both sides of the issues. I'm curious, what would that cost? to the city to structure something like that? would we have?
I'd want to give it some analysis to try to figure out what that would cost. One of the things about issuing checks that is tricky is that we need to have the recipient of the check certify what their Social Security number is, so that we can provide the appropriate notice of receipt of the funds. For example, if you've ever gotten a refund of income tax paid to the state of Colorado, you know that after you get that refund later on in the mail, they've already been able to verify what your Social Security number is and can provide to you a notice of what your refund has been, because that could adjust the individual income tax that you owe. So any disbursement would require kind of a two-way communication. But certainly voter registration ID, that is something that can be done. We can verify who those people are. We can divide the money evenly, just as it was described. That's something that could be done at council's direction. But this interplay of writing a check and where does it go? Of course, we have to print checks, they have to be mailed, whatever the case may be. There would be some overhead. But I'd want to do some analysis of that. But one of the things that is somewhat labor intensive is, again, verifying the Social Security number of the individual who's receiving the funds. That's something that has to be done. And that could be labor intensive.
Mr. Abel.
A couple of things along that line, though. It seems to me a few years back, the state was going to give us a refund, and they couched it as a sales tax refund, I believe, in order to avoid the very thing you're talking about, which is an extra obligation to the federal government because of that refund. Do you recall that?
I don't recall the details. I've lived in Colorado many years. I don't recall getting a check at my house, but it could be, though, that the credit was made on your individual income tax return. I think that's how it's been done in years past. In other words, you do your individual income tax return, don't you get a credit? But I don't recall a check.
It was not attributable to federal income calculation because of the way it was refunded, the category in which it was handled. I believe they said they couched it as a refund of sales tax, and therefore it was not part of your federal gross income calculation. The other thing is, along with all of this conversation, we had a reminder that 2 weeks ago we had one heck of a storm, and it did a lot of damage all across town. What we're talking about is not enough to aid with stormwater. In fact, as you pointed out, Mayor, we probably couldn't take more than, I think you can only increase or add to an enterprise fund less than 10%, Mr. Dorr, from general fund or other sources. So we wouldn't be able to use this for that purpose, but we have to find a way to address these storm water needs, and I'm not sure that ruling out revenue bonds was prudent in view of all the needs. So I think we need to come back and revisit that at some time in the near future. There was a lot of damage last week, 2 weeks ago.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
So we certainly have our work cut out for us, Council. I think that we've heard a lot. I'd encourage the group to get any questions answered through staff this week. And I think stormwater will be coming back. We'll have another presentation, and I know some of that's dedicated to one of the gulches, but certainly, yeah, we know we're looking at just a $35 million potential project there, but one project, and it equals the projects needed is in the 120, 130, 140 range. So I have a couple lights on. Do you have questions or comments? Okay, just process, certainly. Mr. Skilling.
So next week we have more community input, and then there's going to be a larger discussion by us, as I understand it. So that's the 13th. And then there was an August 27th deadline, was that for a second reading? Because I was trying to figure out first and second. It's just a resolution, so we don't need to do all the readings. Okay. So along this process, we've got next week. What are we going to do? What will be the conclusion of next week's meeting? Are we going to have resolution language that we will then vote on 2 weeks from then? Are we planning on voting on language a week from now? What are we doing?
So what I would envision is that we would come to a consensus on if we want to, one, do this or not. And if we're going to do it, then we need to give direction pretty tight to staff, and also, have a fluid conversation with our attorney as to what can and what can't be a part of that ballot. And that's why I think some members have been curious about, could you do one question, then could you do another question that said, do you want it here, 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 here? So if you have those kind of in mind, if we could get those, out this week, and then maybe have some sort of feedback to all of council that covers that for our discussion would be helpful. Ms. Hodson, what would be most beneficial for staff as far as what you're going to need and process wise to help make it meaningful?
Yes, thank you. I believe it's just what you're saying. So for this next week, if you can really be thinking about what those parameters are. A, do you want to send it to the voters or not? So that's kind of the first question. And if the answer is no, then we're done. But if the answer is yes, then how do you want it to go to the voters? What do you want that question to be? Do you want to determine a sunset? And what is that sunset? Do you want it to be the dollars to be earmarked for certain programs or certain elements of your local government? And if so, what do you want that to be? So if you would be thinking about that and direct staff on the 13th, then the attorneys will come up with our best draft of a resolution, and then you can look at that on the 27th and make decisions and decide thumbs up or down on the 27th. But that is a hard due date, that we can't go past the 27th of August, if indeed you decide to put the question on the ballot.
So then is there going to be the next week, there could be a series of brackets, there could be half a dozen different ideas that then get vetted by staff and legal in between the 13th and the 27th.
Well,
there could be half a dozen.
We're hoping for that conversation to be during the 13th, and you are vetting those out in terms of the time. If indeed it goes to the ballots, we'll make that assumption for a moment. So then you decide, you direct staff. Do you want that sunsetted? Do you want it to go to certain programs? How do you want this to be handled? If you can, whatever direction you can give it to us, then we'll turn that into a resolution that you will actually take a formal vote on the 27th.
Okay.
And I think one of the pluses maybe about the 13th and the discussion on 13th is it's not a study session, so it's not going to be consensus. There'll actually be an opportunity to vote on how we want to go. I mean, not vote, but I mean, cull it down to something that's. That was my question. Yeah.
So that's my question. Are we culling it down to one thing? That one thing will then be presented back to us on the 27th. So the 13th is the meeting, because the 27th is the more formal vote. Okay. So,
Yes, that's accurate.
okay.
And we can do that. Miss Franks, then Miss Vincent.
Thanks, Mayor Paul. I'll be quick. I just wanted to add a little bit more since next meeting's discussion is going to be where a lot of decisions need to be made, that it's important, as Mr. Dorr said earlier, that, this is an unusual amount of money, but there's no guarantee that we won't have other storms that make for this unusual peak and valley. So I think we just need to be cognizant of that. And I also wanted to bring forth, some citizens have been to other meetings and bringing forth the idea of, well, can we look at reducing fees for things? That way we don't have an overage or as much of an overage. So certainly wanted to throw those things out there, but for folks who want to kind of bring their ideas forth, because we'll certainly have public comment. But that's all the things that we're looking at is, yes, no on the ballot. Then if it's yes, then what is the uses that we're going to say that we're going to put out there? And then if those uses, what are we going to say about any caps? What are we going to say if yes or no? And about a timeline, a 3-year timeline, a perpetual. Those are all the discussions. And then are there ways that we can equitably give, reduce fees in order to have less of an overage? That's part of the discussion as well. So it's a pretty broad-based discussion. So please, everyone out there watching and those in the audience, we need a lot of rich feedback in the next week in order to have a real productive conversation, which means questions need to be given to staff with time for them to come with answers. And so just be sure that you are, and feel free, whatever you want to do, send it to all of us, send it to a couple of us. We're making sure to kind of feed it all in to make sure we get as much information back to our constituents, and then can speak to as much from the dais next week as possible.
Well said. Ms. Vincent?
And I was going to reiterate some of those same things, so thank you. But a clarification, because I think there is maybe some misunderstanding out there as far as some of the community members that I've talked to. The Tabor question, if it gets on the ballot, has nothing to do with the refund that has to be decided by October. Is that correct? So we have to refund some money.
No.
That decision has to be done by October,
I
but
beg your
that
pardon.
will not impact.
Yeah, thank you. I know that gets confused, and that's one of the functions of Tabor is that you have financial activities in 2017, you have council decision in 2018, and then the refund gets made in 2019. So the $12,536,504 is pending. It has not been made yet. And what council would do is decide that in its budgetary process and in its mill levy setting and in its choice of refund. And that would be implemented in 2019 or not, because if the voters choose something different, it overrides really what council has chosen, a mill levy or a refund or some other such thing to be. So there is $12,536,504. It's pending. It's incomplete. It's not done. It won't be done until 2019.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, because there was, will this go into that pot or will that be separate?
Yep, unless the voters override that.
Correct. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, again, thank you, everyone. Thanks for all the feedback and everybody taking the time to weigh in and the opportunity to have this public session. And I would echo to council, please get your questions, anything, nothing's too small or dumb. Get your questions to staff, and let's try to be ready for a good conversation next Monday night. I wanted to go through and see if there were any committee updates from the committees that our folks serve on. So I'll just go down the list. I think budget and audit, we've had a 2.5-hour update. But is there anything from any of the committee members that you want to add to the conversation? And for reference, that's Councilors Harrison, Beta, and LeBeer. But okay, we'll keep on moving. Jefferson County Economic Development Corporation, that's me. Just certainly always looking at new business prospects. There's a bunch that are interested in Jefferson County, and also some talk along the lines of doing a foreign trade zone designation for the whole county, which could then benefit all the cities that are involved. And those can be somewhat complicated, so I don't want to try to give a report on that tonight, and especially in case I mess it up. But it was essentially could benefit especially our aerospace type businesses within the county. CML Policy Committee, Ms. Johnson and Mr. LeBeer are on that. I don't think you've met, so it's kind of having the summer off. Dr. Cog, Ms. Gutwein, Mr. LeBaire.
Thank you. We've also had a number of meetings canceled for the summer, but what we're working on now is there's a new process to apply for transportation funding through DRCOG. Instead of going through a regional allocation, it's going through a sub-regional allocation, which for us is with Jefferson County. And so we are in the middle of getting that process up and running.
That's great. And as you can imagine, regional is 60 some, and so now we're getting it to sub, which is 6, 7, or 8, but it can still be like making sausage. Not easy. Head Start, Councilors Abel, Vincent, and Franks, anything?
We had the briefing 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, and the discussion of the cost of living increase, but there's nothing new. We're gearing up for another year and looking at expanding the program, especially the full day, and it's our sign-up rate is remarkable. So
that's great, very cool. Thank you. Jefferson County Criminal Justice Committee, Councilors Roybal and Skilling.
Well, there's nothing there.
Okay. It's a nice summer, huh? Jefferson County Community Corrections Board, Councilors Vincent and Abel.
Yes, we meet, and we do have representation on that board, and we meet the fourth Thursday of every month at 7 o'clock at the Taj Mahal, or the Jefferson County building. Yeah, sorry.
And that's for the folks who may not know, that's a heavy-duty board where you are actually part of a group from throughout the county looking at folks who are paroling from prison into the community.
And it's good that we do have representation on there, because we do have the community corrections, in fact, right there on Ward 2. So it is good, and it's not it's a hard committee. Let's just say that.
And we actually have both facilities, men's in Ward 2 and women's in Ward 1. Jefferson County Transportation Committee, Councilor Johnson.
Yes, I do go to that, and I just would like to say that I advocate, or at least ask every time, regarding the interchange at Wadsworth and 6, and particularly the sound wall that needs to go up along 6th Avenue. And obviously it's a funding issue.
Thank you. Judge's Salary Committee, I think that'll come a little bit later. I don't think there's any updates.
We've already done that.
Yep. Legislative Committee. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you. Well, I am biased, and frankly, I feel like it's the most important committee that the city has. Everybody on this committee understands the significance of what we're doing, and that we are actually working on your behalf and having input on at a state level regarding government and legislation, and it's not to be taken lightly. The way that we have organized this is that we take votes on certain bills, only those bills that affect Lakewood directly. And we only weigh in on those bills in which we have a strong opposition or a strong support, and based on our vote. And then that vote will go forward to our legislators. In the process at this point of analyzing those bills that we weighed in that heavily on, and to actually see what happened to them, and to see if we oppose something if it passed. I'm very interested on how that's going for us. Frankly, I want to make sure that we're using our political clout appropriately, and get an idea if we're actually weighing in on the right bills. So that's still in process. Petitions were due today for ballot initiatives, so we will know very shortly just what is actually going to be on the ballot. There were a number of petitions that were turned in, and the mayor has alluded to the fact that we are looking at teaming up with the League of Women Voters, and after we know what's on the ballot, actually having a spotlight on Channel 8 and having spokespersons on both sides of the issue. Not a debate, but actually just a presentation on what the issues are and how both sides see it. So there's a lot going on. Thank you.
Well done, thank you. And those committee members on that are Chair is Councilor Johnson, Jacob LeBeer, Mike Beta, David Skilling, and Dana Gutwein. Police Seizure Fund Committee, Mr. Roybal.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to talk a little bit about that. The seizure fund is usually comes from property or equipment that is seized by the federal government that they sell it and there's funds available, so our police department can go ahead and apply for some of those funds. As of today, we have not requested any of those funds. I don't think there's any out right now, but stay tuned. I think we're going to be asking. Thank you.
Great. And thank you for that explanation, actually, of what you do. Screening Committee, Councilors Abel, Vincent, Beta, Franks, and Harrison.
We are revising the questions that we've been asking applicants for our various boards and commissions. I believe the questions are probably 15, 20 years old, and some of them don't carry much weight anymore. So, but we've been revising those.
Great.
And should be, we're about done. We're looking at Planning Commission soon, and then we'll come back to yeah, we will have them all corrected, and I suppose, Ms. Hodgson, that we bring them back to council for resolution approval, or
I don't think.
Are we just in charge of it?
I think you're just in charge.
Oh, great. I got a whole new list.
Create a committee. Create a committee of the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Sister Cities.
Well, they came and you got to feed them, and unfortunately I wasn't there that night because it was the night before my husband's surgery. So I know that you all enjoyed them, and it was a wonderful opportunity. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you to the city. You put on a great show. Mary did an incredible job, and they really did enjoy their stay. And we have a group coming next month from Stade, Germany. So we'll have the opportunity to mingle with them, another one of our sister cities. We'll keep you posted. Urban drainage, you heard a little bit earlier about a mill levy increase. They're actually looking at a debrucing measure that would increase their dollars about $23 million a year. And as you've seen the storms and all the things that have gone on, they definitely could utilize those dollars, but that'll be up to the communities to decide. But they have a PR campaign going out there just to educate folks on what exactly urban drainage does. And if there's any questions about that, you can contact me and I can get you in touch with those folks. But it's a pretty cool organization that deals with not only flood issues, but also a lot of the open space surrounding our wetlands and waterlands, and in the enhancement and kind of cleaning of the Platte River and things like that. We get grant funding from them, matching dollars to do stabilization projects, cleaning projects, things along those lines. So that's what you may see on the ballot from urban drainage. And that is all we have from committees. So we can go to reports, and I'll go left.
A couple more committees. Campaign finance and development dialogue.
Okay, so go ahead. Campaign finance.
Campaign finance meets Wednesday night at 6. We're moving apace in order and have come to some loose consensus on new limits for donations and methods of making sure that transparency is as available as possible. A lot of money is coming into campaigns through independent expenditure committees and issue committees. We want to make sure that those are as transparent as possible. So we want folks to know who's spending money on our elections.
Great. Development dialogue.
August 14th, 6 p.m. is our next meeting. It's the most attended committee that we have, probably combined of all the committees. So yes, our membership will take credit for that attendance. It's a really good time. People should come out, listen to everything happening with mixed use. But in all seriousness, we are making a lot of headway, making a lot of progress, and we should be actually making some drafting suggestions very soon. So that is the 14th, 6 p.m., and we're going to try to do one other August meeting as well. So,
great. And the Housing Advisory Ad Hoc Committee will have their first meeting on Wednesday at 5 p.m. from 5 to 6:30 p.m. And we'll begin to start looking at the policy recommendations from the housing study, as well as, you know, what the makeup looks like of a housing type advisory committee, who those members should be, what organizations or industries should be represented, and start to move that forward. So that'll be the first meeting. And I think there'll be a synergy back and forth, hopefully, between the development dialogue and the housing ad hoc, because they kind of go together. All right, any other committees? All right, reports. Mr. LeBear?
I guess I would just reiterate that we are having our Ward 2 meeting on Wednesday at 7:30 in the morning at the 40 West building. And then we're going to have an additional one on Saturday at 8 in the morning. Am I saying that right? 8:30 in the morning. And that will be more geared towards having more discussion on Tabor, and our mayor will be there. So it should be a good time. So I hope you'll attend. And that'll be at the 40 West building as well. Thanks.
Should be great. What time is that? Okay. Mr. Abel?
Our Ward 1 meeting was Saturday. We had a great presentation on the development of a family justice center in the Jeffco DA's office that would combine all of the social and legal services in a one-stop location, so that folks don't have to make repeated trips to the county building at great expense and dragging kids along or escorting their kids with them. I would encourage all of our wards to have this presentation. It's very interesting.
Ms. Harrison?
A couple of things. First of all, I know we don't have general business tonight, but I did want to let everybody, Dana and I are working on getting a nuisance/pet/rodent subject onto the agenda at some point, so that we can kind of address what we've seen at 1619 Lee Street. And second thing is, there was a comment made earlier in that about our Ward 5 meeting that my husband hollered, and I just want to say I'm very blessed to have a man who supports me in every single way, and he felt like he was defending me. We had a discussion later that maybe him attending our ward meetings may not be the best solution for him, because he does want to support me at the very end. The point that was made was maybe a little misleading, or I don't know, but I'm blessed to have a man that loves me. So I just want to say, honey, stay home, and I love you a lot. And then the third thing is Action Center is really, really, really looking for any school supplies that you are willing to drop by. This is they donate to well over 5,000 kids in Jefferson County to help them. And we talked earlier, as we were discussing, parents really have a hard time figuring out this time of year what to do and how to pay for it. So if you can help them out, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Mr. Skilling?
Another Ward 4 newsletter went out this month, and it's Pulitzer worthy as usual. But I can take, as usual, also no credit for that. So another great job by Councilor Franks on the newsletter. If you're not getting it, you should get it. And I will let her explain what's coming up this Saturday at 9 a.m. So stay tuned for the next 45 seconds. It's exciting.
Ms. Gutwein.
Thank you. Just also wanted to add a thank you on behalf of Ward 5 for Chief Lohr and Caitlin Galt, who have put really above and beyond, and our neighbors expressed that at our ward meeting as well, that they're really appreciative to the thorough and as fast as possible job that's being done, while also stressing that they all want to continue to see that until the project is all the way finished. So just a thank you. And in my opinion, Doug can still come to the meetings.
Councilor Johnson.
Oh, thank you. Today, Walt and I are celebrating our 51st anniversary. Happy anniversary, honey.
Give you one of these.
It's it's creepy. I got married when I was 3, so I'll be home soon, honey. That's it.
Congratulations, Ms. Vincent.
I just want to say, I guess Saturday is going to be a very busy day. You can go ride on the Interurban Car 25, and then, of course, you'll attend the Ward 2 meeting first before you go do that, and then you can come back and go to Mural Fest.
Mural Fest is this Saturday?
It's this Saturday at uh-oh.
Busy Saturday, it looks
It's
like.
going to be a very busy Saturday.
Mr. Beta.
No report.
Or Ms. Franks.
I cannot live up to that lead-in, so we're just going to pale in comparison. Our Ward 4 meeting is going to be this Saturday, the 11th, from 9:30 to 11 in the same place, Green Mountain Presbyterian Church, and the topics will be Tabor and trash. So we've got the two hot button issues, and of course any other topic that folks want to discuss. A couple other things I wanted to let folks know is on September 8th and 9th, that is when the Festival Italiano in Belmar is, and Zero Waste Services is involved in that, and they are looking for volunteers. And the slot that I'm in has an opening, so if anybody wants to be there with me and help kind of talk that through. So, but be sure to sign up if you want to help with that. It's basically giving out information and also being kind of the dumpster monitor to make sure things that should not be in the trash get diverted. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention was, let me get it up here, is some folks have been a little not sure where the non-emergency calls should be going. And so I just wanted to call attention to the fact that we now have JEFCOM, so basically a centralized place where it dispatches the local police, fire, and emergency medical services. And so that number, and somebody catch me if I'm wrong, I think I got it right, 303-980-7300. And then for the hearing impaired, 303-980-7335 are the two numbers. Of course, continue to call 911 for emergencies. And don't be taken aback. It won't be answered as Lakewood. It's going to be answered under the JEFCOM. So that's thrown a few people. So just wanted to make sure folks know about that change.
Great. Mr. Roybal.
Great. I just wanted to bring everybody to our attention that we're going to be having a community picnic on the 18th of August, and the rededication starts at 10:30, and then the actual picnic starts at noon. So please, everybody come down, Lasley Park, Florida and Pierce. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right, so I will just follow up and close us out with National Night Out is tomorrow night. There'll be plenty of opportunities, lots of parties going on in all neighborhoods throughout Lakewood. I think we got the list today, and it's quite long, at least 40, 45 different parties happening. So get out there, enjoy your neighbors, meet your first responders. I think we try to have police show up to just about everyone if they can. So that should be a lot of fun and a lot of good stuff going on in Lakewood this weekend, it sounds like. So get out and enjoy. And I'll just close with thoughts and prayers to the O'Donnell family, as our police folks are reminded every day of the challenges that they face and the dangers that are out there. So we wish him a speedy recovery, and Ms. Hodson will have an update for us next week. But we certainly are thinking of him and his family during this challenging time. And with that, any other reports? Cool. Agent Hunt, thank you for hanging out with us. Back to school next week, so we will adjourn at 9:58 p.m. Thank you.